Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto is summoned to DxD to marry Rias, Akeno, Koneko and Asia? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A contract forged in light and shadow. The air in the Shikatsu forest was alive. Not with the chatter of birds or the rustle of unseen creatures, but with a deeper, more fundamental hum. It was the thrum of life itself. A symphony of natural energy that resonated in the ancient trees and the moss-covered stones. For Uzumaki Naruto, this was the only place left in the world where he could truly be quiet. He sat cross-legged atop the weathered head of a massive stone slug, a monument to a forgotten age. His eyes were closed, his breathing so slow and steady it was almost imperceptible. The orange pigmentation around his eyes marked him as a perfect sage, a master of the very energy that pulsed around him. Peace had been a stranger for so long that its arrival felt like a phantom limb, an ache where a wound used to be. The Fourth Great Ninja War was over, a scar carved into the heart of their history. Kagaya was sealed, Madara was gone, and the world, for the first time in generations, was united under a banner of tentative hope. He was the hero, the savior, the seventh Hokage in waiting. They chanted his name in the streets, children wore his likeness on their shirts, and every dignitary from every nation knew his face. He had everything he had ever dreamed of. And he had never felt more adrift. It's too quiet, a voice like a rumbling volcano echoed in the vast, watery chamber of his mindscape. Kurama, the nine-tailed fox, lay with his massive head resting on his paws, a single, slitted red eye regarding the projection of Naruto sitting before him. You spend all your life chasing a storm, Kit. You don't know how to act when the sun is out. Naruto didn't open his eyes, but a wry smile touched his lips. Getting poetic in your old age, Kurama. Shut up. I'm just saying, this endless meditating is boring. There's nothing left to fight. The world is saved. Go find that Hyuga girl and make some kits of your own. Give me something to complain about. The thought of Hinata brought a warmth to his chest. But it was a distant warmth, like a fire on a faraway hill. She was kind and strong, and he cared for her deeply. But was that enough? He had spent his life running headlong into the next crisis, the next impossible odd. His purpose had always been clear: protect his friends, save the village, save the world. Now, his friends were safe. The village was rebuilding, stronger than ever. The world was at peace. His purpose, the engine that had driven him since he was a lonely boy on a swing, had sputtered and gone silent. He drew a deep breath, pulling the natural energy of the forest into his very cells. It was a dance, a perfect fusion of his own chakra with the life force of the planet. Here, he felt connected, part of something greater. Out there, in the bustling streets of Konoha, he felt like a relic. A weapon forged for a war that was over. It was then that the hum of the forest changed. A new note entered the symphony, something dissonant and sharp. It was a sour, discordant sound that grated against the pure harmony of sage mode. Naruto's eyes snapped open. The air grew thick, heavy with a pressure that felt like the bottom of the ocean. Below him, the ground began to glow. He leapt from the stone slug, landing silently on the mossy earth 50 feet away. His gaze was fixed on the spot where he had been meditating. A circle of intricate, glowing lines was etching itself into the ground, burning through soil and stone with an unnatural, crimson light. It was a summoning formula, but unlike any he had ever seen. It was impossibly complex, a labyrinth of geometric shapes. Strange runes that looked like a twisted mockery of ancient script, and symbols that seemed to writhe like living things. Naruto, what is that? Kurama's voice was a low growl, stripped of its usual sarcasm. The energy, it feels filthy. Twisted. Naruto's senses, amplified by sage mode, were screaming at him. He could feel two distinct energies warring within the circle. One was dark and seductive, promising power and whispering of ambition. It felt ancient and structured, like a kingdom built on shadows. The other was holy. It was a faint, shimmering thread of light woven through the darkness. An energy of pure faith and healing that felt utterly out of place, yet was undeniably part of the same formula. It was a paradox, a contract written in the languages of both angel and devil. I have no idea. Naruto murmured, his body tensing, coiled like a spring. But I don't think they're asking nicely. The light intensified, a pillar of crimson and gold erupting fr. Ohm the circle with a sound that was not a sound, but a tearing of reality itself. It ripped through the serene forest, silencing the natural energy and replacing it with a violent shriek. The trees bent away from the pillar. Their leaves withering and turning to ash. The very air warped around it. He prepared to leap away, to sever whatever connection it was trying to make, but he was too late. An invisible force, immense and absolute, seized him. It wasn't chakra. It was something else, a raw, conceptual power that bypassed his physical defenses and latched onto his very existence. It was lick. 1,000 hooks sinking into his soul, pulling him forward. It's pulling us through. Kurama roared, the tailed beast's power surging within Naruto, fighting against the pull. For a moment, the force wavered. Naruto's feet dug trenches in the earth as he resisted. The seals on his body glowed as he tapped into the six-path sage mode, the truth-seeking orbs manifesting behind him, ready to obliterate the offensive formula. But then, another energy flared from the circle. This one was different. It wasn't a hook, it was a key. It resonated with a deep, primal part of him, a part connected to the Uzumaki lineage, the masters of sealing arts. The formula wasn't just brute forcing him, it was unlocking a path, using his own heritage as the key to a dimensional gate. To fight it head on would be like trying to punch a keyhole to stop a key from turning. Kit, there's something else. On the other side of the tear, Kurama's voice was suddenly grim, the hint of real alarm coloring his tone. Something empty. A hunger that makes Kagayas feel like a mild appetite. Be on your guard. The resistance was futile. With a final, violent lurch, the world dissolved. Naruto's senses were overwhelmed by a torrent of chaos. He was tumbling through a non-space of screaming colors and fractured time. He saw glimpses of worlds burning, of stars being born, of alien geometries that made his head ache. The sensation of being pulled apart and reassembled 1,000 times a second was excruciating. He focused on a single point of clarity, his own consciousness, anchored by the thundering presence of Kurama within him. He was Uzumaki Naruto. He would not break. The chaos ended as abruptly as it began. One moment he was in the vortex, the next he was standing on solid ground, the disorienting vertigo vanishing in an instant. The transition was so seamless it was more jarring than the journey itself. He didn't stumble. His body, honed by a lifetime of war, was already in a low defensive stance, his senses reaching out. Cataloging his new environment before he had even fully processed the change. He was in an office. A ridiculously opulent office. The floor was polished marble that reflected the light of a grand crystal chandelier. The walls were lined with towering bookshelves filled with leather-bound tomes. A large, ornate desk carved from a dark, rich wood sat at the far end of the room, and behind it, floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a sky that was the wrong color, a deep, royal purple streaked with crimson clouds. It was night, but there was no moon. Instead, constellations of unfamiliar stars glittered in the alien sky. He was not alone. Behind the desk sat a man with long, crimson hair that defied gravity, his handsome features composed in an expression of calm appraisal. His eyes, a striking blue-green, held an ancient intelligence and a power that made the air itself feel heavy. He wore elegant, noble attire that seemed more fitting for a king than an office worker. The pressure he emitted was staggering, a quiet declaration of absolute authority. It dwarfed any cage Naruto had ever met. Standing beside him was a woman in a French maid's uniform. Her silver hair was braided. And her expression was one of cool, professional detachment. But her eyes missed nothing. She radiated a controlled, icy power that was just as intimidating as the man's, a coiled serpent ready to strike. And between him and the desk stood 4 girls. They were young, probably late teens. The one in front, who shared the man's shocking crimson hair, stood with a defiant tilt to her chin. Though Naruto could see the nervous tension in her hands. Her blue-green eyes, so like the man's, were filled with a mixture of resentment, fear, and a burning curiosity as she stared at him. She was dressed in what looked like a school uniform, as were the others. Beside her, a beautiful girl with long, black hair tied in a ponytail had a gentle, almost seductive smile on her face, but it didn't quite reach her violet eyes. In her, Naruto's senses detected a strange conflict, the same blend of holy and profane energies from the summoning circle, churning within her like a storm. To T. The other side was a petite girl with white hair and a stoic, almost blank expression. She was eating a chocolate bar with a detached air, but her hazel eyes tracked his every micro-expression. She was small. But the power coiled in her tiny frame was dense and potent, like a miniature star. Finally, standing slightly behind the rest, was a blonde girl with gentle green eyes. She clutched a simple cross around her neck. Her entire posture radiating a kindness and innocence that felt profoundly out of place in this room of predators. She looked at him with wide, frightened eyes, clearly terrified by the proceedings. Naruto slowly straightened up, his six-path sage mode receding, the truth-seeking orbs melting away. The orange pigmentation around his eyes faded, leaving his cerulean blues clear and sharp. He kept his hands open and away from his body, a universal sign of non-aggression. He was in an unknown place, surrounded by beings of immense power. A reckless charge was idiotic. Info. Our Mashin was the most valuable weapon right now. The crimson-haired man behind the desk finally spoke, his voice smooth and resonant, filling the silent room. Uzumaki Naruto. I am Sears X Lucifer. I apologize for the unconventional method of invitation. I can assure you, we meant you no harm. Lucifer. The name meant nothing to Naruto, but the title felt heavy. He glanced at the four girls again, then back at Sears X. Invitation? He asked, his voice calm, level. Usually, you ask first. You don't drag someone across, wherever this is. A small, genuine smile touched Sears X's lips. A fair point. Unfortunately, our situation is one of some urgency, and your reputation is considerable. We could not risk a refusal. He gestured to the redhead in the front. This is my beloved sister, Rias Grimori. Rias flinched slightly at the word, beloved, but inclined her head with regal formality. And her peerage, Sears X continued, gesturing to the others. Akeno Himehima, Koneko Tuju, and Asia Argento. Each of the girls gave a small, almost imperceptible nod as their name was called, their eyes remaining fixed on him. Naruto took in the scene. The powerful man, his sister, her peerage. It felt feudal. A dynamic of lord and vassals. He was the outsider, the unknown element brought into their world. All right, Sears X Lucifer, Naruto said, crossing his arms. You've brought me here. You know my name. Why? Sears X, smile faded, replaced by a somber gravity. Our race, the Devils, is facing a crisis. A war in a bygone era, the great war between us, the angels, and the fallen angels, decimated our population. Of the original 72 pillars of our nobility, less than half remain. The birth rate among pure-blooded devils has plummeted. We are, to put it bluntly, a dying race. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Naruto remained silent, his expression unreadable. This sounded like a political problem, one that had nothing to do with him. My family, the Grimori, is one of the highest-ranking houses in the underworld, Sears X continued. As such, my sister Rias carries a heavy burden. She is being pressured by the Council of Elders into a Paulit. Ikal marriage to preserve the purity of a noble bloodline. An arrangement she is, vehemently against. He looked at Rias, and for a moment, the mask of the king slipped, revealing the concern of an older brother. Rias's jaw tightened, her defiance flaring in her eyes. We have searched for an alternative solution, Sears X said, his gaze returning to Naruto. A way to secure my sister's future and introduce new, powerful genetics into our stagnant bloodlines. We searched across dimensions, looking for a being of immense power, unique heritage, and, most importantly, a strong character. All paths led to you, Uzumaki Naruto. Hero of the Fourth Great Ninja War. Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Inheritor of the Sage of Six Paths, power. A being of unparalleled life force and strength. Naruto's blood ran cold. They knew everything. The level of information they possessed was terrifying. He felt a flicker of anger, the primal instinct to lash out at being so thoroughly exposed. But he crushed it. Anger was a useless emotion here. What do you want? He asked, his voice now dangerously soft. Sears X steepled his fingers, his expression grave. I want you to marry my sister, Rias. And her peerage. Akeno, Koneko, and Asia are all part of her household, bound to her. By marrying them, you would become the new patriarch of a new branch of the Grimori clan. Your children would possess your incredible vitality and power. revitalizing our people and securing their lineage for generations. In return, you would be granted a title of nobility, unimaginable wealth, and a status equal to the highest lords of the underworld. You would have a new home, a new purpose, and a family that would be the envy of our entire world. Silence. The air in the room became so thick it was hard to breathe. Naruto stared at Sears, his mind racing. This wasn't an invitation. It was a transaction. He wasn't a guest, he was breeding stock. He glanced at the girls. Rias was staring at him, her expression a maelstrom of emotions, shame, defiance, and a desperate, silent plea. Akeno's smile was gone, replaced by a guarded, watchful look. Koneko had stopped eating her chocolate, her small hands clenched into fists. Asia looked like she was about to faint, her face pale with horror at the bluntness of the proposal. They were property. Pawns in a political game, being offered up to a stranger from Anyo. Their world to solve their race's problems. And something inside Naruto, something forged in the lonely days of his childhood, in the scorn of the villagers, in the pain of being seen as nothing but the monster sealed within him, snapped. But it wasn't an explosion of rage. It was a cold, sharp clarity. He slowly uncrossed his arms. He looked past Sears, past the power and the title of Lucifer. He looked at each of the four girls. Meeting their eyes one by one. He saw their lack of choice. He saw their fear. He saw himself, years ago, a boy desperate for anyone to see him for who he was, not what he contained. Finally, his gaze settled back on Sears. He spoke, and his voice, though quiet, cut through the oppressive silence like a kunai through silk. No. The word hung in the air, simple, absolute, and utterly unexpected. Sears' eyebrows rose in surprise. Graphia's posture stiffened fractionally. Rias's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. I beg your pardon. Sears asked, clearly taken aback. I said no, Naruto repeated, his voice unwavering. I will not be a part of any forced marriage. I will not be used as a tool to solve your political problems, and I will not treat them. He gave a sharp nod towards the girls, like prizes to be won or cattle to be bred. My entire life, I have fought against people who see others as nothing more than tools for their ambition. I will not become one of them. He took a step forward, and the pressure in the room shifted. It was no longer Sears' domain. A new power was asserting itself. It wasn't oppressive or dark. It was vast and elemental. Like the sky, the earth, the very air. It was the power of a man who had faced down gods and monsters, who had the unshakable conviction of his own soul. For the first time, Sears' calm expression wavered. A flicker of genuine shock in his eyes. He wasn't just seeing power, he was seeing will. Rias stared, speechless. She had expected him to be a barbarian, a powerful brute who would either accept the offer greedily or try to fight his way out. She had not expected this quiet, unshakable dignity. She had not expected him to defend her honor. I understand your position, Naruto-san, Sears said. Recovering his composure, his tone now laced with a newfound respect. Perhaps I was too transactional in my approach. But the situation remains. My sister's freedom and the stability of the underworld are at stake. What alternative do you see? Naruto's mind worked furiously. He could fight. With Kurama and Six Paths' power, he was confident he could at least escape. But to where? He was in another dimension. A blind fight would solve nothing and likely get people hurt. And looking at Rias, at Asia, he didn't want to hurt them. There had to be another way. A shinobi's greatest weapon wasn't jutsu, it was finding the unexpected path, the third option in a two-choice dilemma. He looked at the girls again. They were staring at him now, not with fear, but with a dawning, fragile hope. You said you brought me here because of my character, Naruto stated, his gaze locking with Sears'. Alright. Let's make a deal based on that. Not on bloodlines and politics. He took another step, closing the distance until he stood directly before the girls, placing himself between them and the desk. He wasn't shielding them physically, but the message was clear. They were now part of his side of the negotiation. Here's my counter-offer, Naruto announced, his voice ringing with authority. I will not marry anyone today. I won't agree to be your stud horse. But I see your problem. You need to get the political vultures off your sister's back. You need a deterrent. So I'll be that. He turned his head slightly, looking at Rias over his shoulder. I'll stay for 1 year. For that year, I will act as your guardian, your ally, your fiancé, if that's the title you need to sell it. I'll be a part of your house. I'll fight your battles, help you train, and I will put anyone who threatens you into the ground. I will give you my strength, my loyalty, and my protection. Freely. He turned back to Searsex, whose expression was one of rapt fascination. During that year, Naruto continued. We will get to know each other. All of us. As people. Not as political assets. At the end of that year, we re-evaluate. If, and only if, Rias, Akeno, Koneko, and Asia all agree, of their own free will, that they want this marriage to happen, and if I agree as well, then I will accept your proposal. But if a single one of them says no, for any reason, the deal is off. The contract is void. And in return for my year of service, you will use all your power and resources to find a way to send me back to my own world. No tricks, no loopholes. He let his proposal settle. It was a masterstroke. A gambit that addressed everyone's needs while sacrificing no one's agency. It gave Searsex the political shield he needed, it gave Rias and her peerage the freedom and time they deserved. And it gave Naruto a clear objective and an exit strategy. It turned a forced contract into a probationary alliance. Rias was staring at his back, her heart pounding in her chest. He hadn't even asked her. He had assumed she wanted her freedom and had built his entire argument around it. He had given her a voice without her having to speak a word. Akeno's teasing smile had returned, but this time it was genuine. Tinged with a deep and startling interest. This man was far more than just a mountain of power. He was clever. He was honorable. He was fascinating. Koneko tilted her head, her hazel eyes blinking slowly. Her internal assessment of him was being rapidly rewritten. He wasn't a threat. He was a shield. Asia, who had been trembling, felt a wave of profound relief wash over her. The terrifying man with the sun-colored hair had a gentle soul. He had protected them, complete strangers, from a king. Searsex Lucifer, one of the most powerful beings in existence, leaned back in his chair. He looked from Naruto to his sister, saw the undisguised hope in her eyes, and a slow, broad smile spread across his face. It was a smile of genuine admiration. In Uzumaki indeed, he said. A soft chuckle in his voice. Masters of sealing the unsealable and, it seems, renegotiating the non-negotiable. You have found a path I did not see. He stood up, a gesture of respect. Your terms are more than fair. Uzumaki Naruto. They are honorable. I accept. For 1 year, you will be the official fiancé of Rias Gremory and the guardian of her peerage. You will have the full support and protection of the House of Gremory and my own personal backing. At the end of that year, the choice will be yours to make. Together. Graphia, the silver-haired maid, materialized a glowing contract scroll and a pen from thin air. The terms were written in shimmering, demonic script, but as Naruto watched, the words shifted, rewriting themselves to reflect the new agreement. Sign this, and the pact is sealed, Searsex said. Naruto walked to the desk, picked up the pen, and signed his name with a bold, confident stroke. As he did, a pulse of energy, both light and dark, emanated from the scroll. Sealing the promise in the laws of this new world. The pact was made. The tension in the room finally broke, replaced by a sense of bewildered new beginnings. Naruto turned to face the 4 girls who were now, for all intents and purposes, his responsibility. His charges. His potential family. He offered them a small, genuine smile, the first one he'd shown since arriving. It was same smile that had won over villagers, enemies, and tailed beasts. A smile that promised trust and acceptance. Looks like we're stuck with each other for a while, he said. My name is Naruto. It's nice to meet you all properly. He had just stepped onto a battlefield unlike any he had ever known. A world of devils, angels, and gods, of political intrigue and ancient secrets. But as he looked at the 4 girls before him, at the flicker of hope in their eyes, he felt the first stirrings of something he thought he had lost forever. Purpose. And deep within his soul, Kurama settled down, a low rumble of contentment in his chest. The sun may have been out in their old world, but here, it seemed, a storm was brewing. And his kid had just walked right into the eye of it. It was going to be interesting. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2, The Fox and the Rookery. The transition from a world-renowned war hero to a third-year high school student was, to put it mildly, surreal. For the past week, Maki Naruto had navigated the halls of Kuo Academy like a shinobi on a long-term infiltration mission. He wore the standard male uniform, carried a bag with books he never opened, and sat at a desk in the back of the class, a silent, watchful presence that the student body had quickly labeled as the intimidatingly cool transfer student. He was an object of intense curiosity, particularly among the female population. A fact he found far more awkward than facing down an army of Zetsu. His days were a study in observation. He watched the flow of students in the hallways, the social cliques for Mingen dissolving like eddies in a stream, the subtle power dynamics between teachers and students. He catalogued exits, sightlines, and potential ambush points out of sheer, ingrained habit. To him, the school was a peaceful, if bizarrely structured, village. He found a strange comfort in its mundane rhythm, the chime of the bell, the drone of a history lesson, the scent of lunch from the cafeteria. It was a peace he had fought for, even if it wasn't his own. His true purpose, however, began after the final bell, in the old, wooden school building that housed the Occult Research Club. The PLACE hummed with a low-level demonic energy, a constant thrum beneath the floorboards that was imperceptible to humans but as clear as day to his sage senses. It was there he truly interacted with his new charges. Rias Grimori, the king, treated him with a formal, almost cautious respect. She was the leader, and she was determined to show that she was in control of her own house, even with a powerhouse of a fiancé foisted upon her. He understood and respected her position, offering his input only when asked, never overstepping his role as guardian. He could see the brilliant strategist beneath the teenage girl's exterior and knew his job was to nurture that, not supplant it. Akeno Himahima, the queen, was another story entirely. Her interactions were a constant barrage of playful flirting and subtle probing. She would stand a little too close, her voice a seductive whisper as she asked him questions about his power, her violet eyes dancing with a mischievous light that held a much deeper, more complex darkness. He met her teasing with an unflappable, good-natured calm that seemed to intrigue her more than any other reaction could. He could sense the storm of holy and demonic energy within her, a constant internal war. And knew her flirtatious demeanor was a carefully constructed shield. Koneko Tuju, the rook, was a silent enigma. She observed him constantly with those wide, unblinking hazel eyes. Her expression a perfect mask of stoicism. She rarely spoke to him directly, but he noticed she no longer sat on the opposite side of the room. Her orbit had shrunk, and she now often chose a seat just a few feet away. A silent satellite in his gravitational pull. He never pushed, never tried to force a conversation. He simply acknowledged her presence with a nod, a quiet earring of acceptance that she seemed to prefer over words. Asia Argento, the bishop, was his most frequent companion. Her gentle, kind nature was a balm in this world of shadows and power plays. She would ask him about his home, his friends. And he would share simple, edited stories of Konoha, of Ichiraku Ramen, of his dream to become Hokage. He, in turn, found himself becoming fiercely protective of her innocence. He saw how she struggled with her identity as a devil after a lifetime in the church, and he made a point to reinforce that her kindness was a strength, not a weakness to be discarded. And then there was Issei Hyodo. The pawn. The boy was a walking paradox. Within him, Naruto could sense the slumbering, world-shaking power of a celestial dragon, a potential that could rival a tailed beast. But it was trapped in the mind of an unabashed, loud-mouthed pervert. Naruto's interactions with Issei were blunt and to the point. He'd cut straight through Issei's fantasies of a harem with a sharp focus, or you'll die. Your power means nothing if your head's in the gutter. It was harsh, but it was the kind of direct, goal-oriented criticism Issei had never received, and in a strange way, it was starting to work. The true measure of their new dynamic, however, took place in the expansive training area beneath the clubroom. It was a vast, cavernous space, created by demonic magic, where they could cut loose without fear of destroying the school. Today, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and effort. Kiba Yuto, the knight, was a blur of motion. His demonic sword, a sleek black blade, moved with blinding speed, a whirlwind of silver in the dimly lit chamber. He was sparring with Naruto, who hadn't moved from the center of the room. For Kiba, it was like fighting a ghost. You're fast, Kiba, Naruto said, his voice calm and even as he deflected a lightning-fast thrust with the back of his hand, the force of the blow dispersing harmlessly against his chakra-reinforced skin. Kiba used his signature speed to disengage and reappear on Naruto's left, his blade descending in a vicious arc. Naruto simply pivoted on his heel, the sword whistling past his nose, and tapped Kiba's extended elbow with 2 fingers. A jolt of chakra, no stronger than a static shock, was enough to make Kiba's arm go numb, forcing him to drop his sword. Kiba stumbled back, shaking his tingling arm. His expression a mixture of frustration and awe. How? I didn't even see you move. You don't need to, Naruto replied, picking up the demonic sword and offering it back to him, hilt first. You rely too much on your speed. It's your greatest asset, but you let it control your tactics. Your footwork is all about forward momentum. You put all your weight into the attack, but it leaves you with no foundation if you miss or get blocked. He demonstrated, mimicking Kiba's lunge. See? All your energy is moving in one direction. You're a speeding arrow. But an arrow can't change direction once it's fired. Then he shifted his stance, sinking his weight lower, his feet planted wider. Stay grounded. Let your speed serve your technique, not the other way around. A river is fast, but it can also change course. Be a river, not an arrow. Kiba took his sword, his eyes wide with understanding. It was a simple, profound piece of advice that no one had ever given him. He had always been told to be faster. But never to be smarter with his speed. He bowed his head slightly. Thank you, Naruto-san. Across the room, a frustrated yell echoed. Boost. 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 Come on, you stupid gauntlet. Give me more power. Issei was waving his arm, the red boosted gear glowing erratically. Naruto walked over, his expression unreadable. What are you doing? I'm trying to increase my power. Issei said, sweat beading on his forehead. But it only boosts every 10 seconds. I need it to be faster if I'm going to be a harem king. Naruto sighed, resisting the urge to facepalm. You're yelling at a sacred treasure that contains the soul of a celestial dragon. Do you think it's impressed? Issei stammered. It's not a machine, Issei. It's a part of you now. You can't command it. You have to sync with it. Naruto tapped Issei's chest. The power doesn't come from your mouth. It comes from here. Your will. Your intent. Stop thinking about harems for 2 seconds and focus on the feeling of the dragon's power inside you. Feel its rhythm. Breathe with it. When your heartbeat and its heartbeat are the same, then you won't have to ask. The power will just come. He walked away, leaving a bewildered Issei to stare at his gauntlet with a new, contemplative expression. Maybe Naruto was right. Maybe he should try listening to the dragon instead of yelling at it. Naruto's gaze then fell upon Koneko. She was pummeling a massive, reinforced heavy bag with methodical, powerful strikes. Each impact sent a shockwave through the room, a testament to the raw, physical power of a rook. But Naruto, a master of taijutsu who had traded blows with gods, saw the inefficiency. Her power was a sledgehammer, devastating but unrefined. He approached her silently. She didn't stop her assault on the bag. But he knew she was aware of his presence. He watched for another moment, then spoke, his voice quiet enough that only she could hear. You're all arms. She paused, her fist hovering an inch from the bag. She turned her head slightly, her hazel eyes questioning him. He didn't elaborate with a long speech. He simply stepped to her side, lightly tapped her hip with his finger, then tapped the floor beneath her feet. Your power starts here, he said, pointing to the ground. It travels up through your legs, and your hips are the trigger. You're hitting with your shoulders. That's a leak. All that power from the ground is being wasted. Twist your hip a quarter of a second before you throw the punch. Let the force of the whole world be behind your fist, not just your arm. He gave a small nod and walked away, heading toward the bench where Asia was practicing her healing magic on a wilted plant. Koneko stood frozen for a long moment, staring at the bag. Then, slowly, she turned to face it. She took a deep breath, planted her feet, and as she threw a punch, she focused on a single thought, twisting her hip. The impact was entirely different. It wasn't just louder. The bag didn't just swing back. It exploded, the chains snapping from the ceiling as sand and enchanted weights burst from the leather casing in a massive cloud. The entire room fell silent. Everyone stared at the obliterated bag. Then at the small, white-haired girl standing before it, her fist still extended. Koneko stared at her own hand, her eyes wide with a shock that momentarily broke through her stoic facade. Before anyone could comment, the air in the center of the room shimmered and distorted. A magic circle, bearing the proud crest of the House of Grimoire, blazed to life on the floor. From it rose the calm, imposing figure of Graphia Lucifuge, her silver hair and maid uniform a stark contrast to the raw power she exuded. The mood shifted instantly from training to high alert. Rias stepped forward, her expression hardening. Graphia. What is it? Has something happened? Graphia's face was, as always, a mask of professional neutrality, but her eyes held a hint of grim news. Greetings, Lady Rias. I come with a message from your father, Lord Grimoire. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the assembled peerage before finally landing on Naruto, holding for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Under continued pressure from the Council of Elders and the Phoenix family, your father has been forced to formalize your engagement contract with Riser Phoenix. The words drop Ed into the room like stones in a silent pool. Rias's face paled. No. He can't. We had an agreement. Naruto's presence was supposed to stop this. It has delayed it, my lady, Graphia corrected, her voice gentle but firm. Uzumaki-sama's status as your fiancé has thrown the elders into chaos, but the old contracts, signed generations ago, are magically binding. The Phoenix clan has invoked their right to a trial by combat. As per the ancient rules, the matter will be settled in a formal rating game. A rating game, Rias whispered, her hands clenching into fists. It was the one outcome she had been dreading. A direct confrontation where her inexperienced peerage would be pitted against the full, battle-hardened household of a high-class devil. Just as the weight of the news settled, a second magic circle erupted in the room. This one a swirling vortex of orange flame. It was arrogant, loud, and reeked of smug superiority. From the flames stepped not one, but 4 figures. The leader was a woman with long, curly blue hair. Dressed in revealing armor. Her eyes, filled with disdain, scanned the occult research club members as if they were insects. Well, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. So this is the Grimoire hovel. I am Ubeluna, queen of the noble house of Phoenix. My lord, Riser, sent us to inspect the competition. Behind her stood a cocky young man with the aura of a knight, a hulking, brutish-looking man who was clearly a rook, and another woman who watched them with a bored expression. They fanned out, their gazes sweeping over Rias's peerage with open mockery. Is this all? The knight sneered, his eyes landing on Issei. A pathetic human with a fancy glove. Rias-sama is truly scraping the bottom of the barrel. Issei bristled, his boosted gear manifesting on his arm. What did you say, you bastard? Don't waste your breath, Carlamine, Ubeluna said, her gaze now fixed on Rias. Lord Riser will soon be her husband. She will learn her place. And these toys will be discarded. She spoke of Rias as if she weren't even in the room, a possession to be claimed. Rias's demonic power flared, a crimson aura surrounding her. Get out of my clubroom. You are not welcome here. Quote. Ubeluna simply laughed, a grating, unpleasant sound. Oh, we will leave. But not before we deliver a message from our master. Her eyes finally settled on Naruto, who had remained silent. Watching the entire exchange without a word. So you're the new pet. A human, I hear. Lord Riser is amused by Rias-sama's taste in exotic animals. He says he might even let you live as a servant in the castle after the wedding. The insult was clear, a deliberate provocation. Kiba's hand went to the hilt of his sword. Akeno's smile had vanished, replaced by a chillin' emptiness as arcs of lightning began to dance around her fingers. Koneko took a half step forward, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Just as the tension was about to snap, just as Rias was about to give the order to attack, Naruto moved. He didn't charge or yell. He simply took 2 steps forward, placing himself between Ubeluna and Rias. He hadn't activated any special powers, but his presense alone seemed to suck the air out of the room. This is Rias's room, he said, his voice quiet, yet it carried over every other sound. You are uninvited guests. Leave. Carlamine, the knight, let out a bark of laughter. And who are you to give us orders, human? She vanished in a burst of speed, reappearing in front of Naruto, her fist cocked back. I'll teach you your place. Her fist flew towards his face. To everyone else, it was a blur. To Naruto, it was painfully slow. He didn't even bother to dodge. At the last possible fraction of a second, as her knuckles were about to connect with his cheek, he moved. His hand shot up. Not to block, but to catch. He grabbed her entire face, his fingers wrapping around her jaw and skull, his thumb pressing against her cheek. Her incredible momentum came to a dead, shocking halt. Her eyes widened in terror and disbelief. With a simple, almost casual flex of his wrist, he slammed her headfirst into the stone floor. The impact was sickening, a crack echoing through the chamber as the tiles shattered beneath her skull. She didn't even scream. She was out cold before the sound of the impact faded. One down. The hulking rook roared in rage and charged. His fists glowing with demonic energy. You bastard. I'll crush you. Naruto turned to face the incoming behemoth. A perfect, swirling sphere of blue chakra materialized in his palm. It wasn't the giant Rasenshuriken he used to level mountains. It was a small, dense, perfectly controlled Rasengan, no bigger than his hand. He didn't dodge the rook's punch. He met it. As the massive, glowing fist descended, Naruto thrust the Rasengan forward. The collision was not the explosion they expected. It was a grinding, tearing shriek of sound as the Rasengan's rotational power met the rook's raw force. The demonic energy around the rook's fist was shredded, his enchanted gauntlet disintegrated into dust, and the Rasengan continued, carving a spiral path up his arm before slamming into his chest. He was thrown backward like a cannonball, smashing into the far wall and sliding to the floor in an unconscious heap. 2 down. The whole exchange had taken less than 5 seconds. The remaining members of Riser's peerage were frozen in absolute shock. Yubeluna, the queen, finally broke from her stupor, her face a mask of fury and fear. Her hands glowed with powerful, explosive magic. You'll pay for that, you filthy. She never finished the sentence. A flicker of movement behind her, and suddenly there was another Naruto, a perfect duplicate, standing there with a 3-pronged kunai held gently against her throat. The clone's eyes were cold and empty of emotion. I wouldn't, the clone said calmly. Yubeluna froze, the magic in her hands sputtering out. She could feel the razor-sharp edge of the blade against her skin. She could sense the utter lack of hesitation in the being holding it. He wasn't threatening her. He was stating a fact. Just then, the fiery magic circle flared once more. This time, a man with short blonde hair and a regal, arrogant posture stepped out. He wore a fine red suit and looked around with an air of ownership. Riser Phoenix had arrived. He took in the scene in an instant. 2 of his peerage members unconscious on the floor, his queen held hostage by a clone, and a calm, orange-clad stranger standing in the middle of it all. His arrogant smile faltered for the first time. He looked at Naruto, truly looked at him, and saw something that made the immortal flesh of a Phoenix prickle with alarm. He saw no fear. No anger. Just a chillingly calm void. What is the meaning of this? Riser demanded, trying to regain control of the situation. Naruto didn't even look at him. His eyes remained on Yubeluna. They attacked. I defended. He finally turned his head. His blue eyes locking onto Riser's. The pressure that rolled off him was immense, the silent promise of a violence Riser couldn't even comprehend. Now take your trash and get out of her clubroom. The command was absolute. There was no room for negotiation, no space for Riser's usual bluster. For the first time in his long, arrogant life, Riser Phoenix felt a sliver of genuine fear. This human was not a pet. He was a monster. Clenching his jaw, Riser gave a sharp nod. With a wave of his hand, his unconscious peerage members floated into the air. The Naruto clone dispelled in a puff of smoke. Yubeluna scrambled back to her master's side, clutching her throat. This changes nothing, Riser spat, his pride forcing him to get the last word. The rating game is set. My victory is assured. I will enjoy breaking you, human. And I will enjoy making Rias watch. With a final, hateful glare, he and his peerage vanished in a column of fire. The training room was plunged into a deafening silence. The members of the occult research club stared, utterly speechless. They had seen him train, they had felt his power, but they hadn't understood its true nature. It wasn't just strength, it was a terrifying, lethal efficiency. He hadn't fought a battle, he had performed a surgical removal of a threat. It was over before it had even begun. Issei swallowed hard, his dreams of a hair. Momentarily forgotten and replaced by the stark realization of what a true warrior looked like. Kiba stared at Naruto with an expression of pure, unadulterated reverence. Asia had her hands over her mouth, half in horror at the brutality, half in overwhelming relief. Akeno was the first to speak, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face, devoid of any teasing. Era, you certainly know how to handle unruly guests. Naruto-kun. Koneko, who had been ready to fight, simply stared at him for a long, silent moment. She then walked over, picked up a new chocolate bar from her pocket, and offered it to him. It was the highest praise she could give. Naruto accepted the chocolate with a small smile. Thanks. Rias was looking at him, her mind reeling. The dread of the engagement, the fear of Riser, it was all still there. But now, it was mixed with something else. A powerful, soaring hope. She had thought Naruto was a trump card, a powerful piece she could use. She was wrong. He wasn't a piece on the board. He was the one who could flip the entire table. He turned to face them, the chillingly calm warrior vanishing, replaced by the familiar, determined young man. He unwrapped the chocolate bar and took a bite. Problems delayed, not solved, he said, his voice back to its normal, easygoing tone. The real fight is the rating game. He looked at Rias, a confident, reassuring grin spreading across his face. So, he wants a game. Let's give him one he'll never forget. He took another bite of chocolate. Alright. Let's get back to training, shall we? Chapter 2 end. Chapter 3. Checkmate, Phoenix. The 10 days leading up to the rating game were a blur of intense, focused energy. The atmosphere in the occult research club had transformed. The casual, almost lazy pace of their previous activities was gone. Replaced by the sharp, electric hum of a unit preparing for war. Naruto had, with Rias's full blessing, taken charge of their training regimen. It was brutal, efficient, and unlike anything they had ever experienced. He ran them through physical conditioning exercises until they were gasping on the floor, then pushed them to do more. He drilled them in teamwork, forcing Kiba and Koneko to learn each other's rhythms until they could move as a single, fluid unit of speed and power. He had Akeno practice not just raw destructive output, but precision, creating tiny, controlled lightning strikes that could disable a target without leveling the landscape. He even managed to get Issei to focus, teaching him to listen to the dragon in his soul, to feel the buoy. LD up of power and release it not in a desperate shout, but with a focused, willful intent. The night before the match, he gathered them not in the training area, but in the clubroom itself. A large, hand-drawn map of Kuo Academy was spread across the central table. It was meticulously detailed, with patrol routes, blind spots, and structural weaknesses all marked in neat, precise script. A conventional fight against Riser's peerage is a losing battle, Naruto began, his voice calm and steady, commanding their full attention. They're more experienced, they have a full 15-piece set, and their teamwork has been forged over decades, not days. We can't beat them at their own game. Rias nodded grimly. He's right. A head-on confrontation would be disastrous. Riser's pieces are veterans. So, we don't play their game. Naruto said, tapping the map. We play ours. He looked around the table, meeting each of their eyes. The arena is a perfect replica of the school. They'll expect us to fortify a position. Probably this clubroom, and wait for them. They'll come at us in a coordinated wave, expecting to crush us with superior numbers and experience. That's our advantage. Their expectations are our first target. He placed a small stone on the gymnasium. Rias, you will be here. You're the king. You're the target. They will sense your demonic signature above all others. You will raise a defensive barrier. Make it look like you're preparing for a siege. You are the bait. Rias's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't object. She trusted him. Akeno, he continued, looking at the black-haired girl. You'll be with her, but outside the main gym, in the cloud cover. Your job is aerial superiority. Don't engage directly. You are the thunder. When I give the signal, you unleash hell on designated targets. Your role is disruption and overwhelming firepower from an unexpected angle. Akeno gave him a confident, almost predatory smile. Kiba, Koneko. You two are the vanguard. He moved 2 more stones to the front gate of the school grounds. You will meet their initial scouting party head-on. Don't hide. Be loud. Be aggressive. Make them think our entire force is committed to a frontal assault. Your job isn't to win, it's to stall and sell the illusion. Kiba nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Koneko simply gave a sharp, determined nod, her small frame radiating a newfound confidence. Issei looked at the map, confused. Wait, what about me? And what about you, Naruto? Naruto looked at the pawn, a serious expression on his face. You, Issei, have the most important job of all. You're the hidden ace. He pointed to a small, isolated maintenance shed near the back of the school track. You will go here and stay hidden. You will suppress your aura completely. They won't even know you're on the board. You are not to move or engage until you hear my voice in your head. Understood. Issei looked disappointed at the idea of hiding, but the gravity in Naruto's tone made him nod. Okay. I get it. Hide and wait. And me. Naruto smiled, and it was a sharp, foxy grin that sent a shiver down their spines. He tapped the map, but not on a single location. His finger traced a dozen different paths, weaving through the replica of the school like a phantom. I'm the ghost. I won't be where they think I am. I'll be everywhere else. He looked up, his blue eyes blazing with a fierce, strategic light. They think this is a raiding game. A sport. We're going to treat it like a hunt. We dismantle them, piece by piece, from the shadows. We control the flow of the battle. We dictate the terms of every engagement, and we never, ever let them fight on their terms. Any questions? The room was silent. They were looking at him not just as a powerful ally, but as a true commander. He had given them a plan that didn't rely on them suddenly becoming stronger than their opponents, it relied on them being smarter, more coordinated, and more ruthless. He had given them a path to victory. Rias was the one who broke the silence, her voice filled with a conviction he hadn't heard before. No. No questions. We will follow your plan to the letter. The transition to the battle dimension was disorienting, a swirl of crimson Grimoire energy that solidified into the familiar grounds of Kuo Academy. The sky was the same unnatural purple of the underworld, but every building, every tree, every blade of grass was a perfect copy. An amplified, disembodied voice echoed through the artificial sky, the official announcer for the game. Welcome, esteemed members of the Devil Nobility, to this much anticipated raiding game. On one side, we have the challenger, the jewel of the House of Grimoire, the Princess of Ruin, Rias Grimoire, and her courageous peerage. A holographic screen materialized high in the sky, showing the faces of Rias and her peerage, including Naruto, who was listed simply as a mutated pawn piece, due to his unique status. It was a designation Searsex had insisted upon to keep Naruto's true nature under wraps. And on the other side, the man of the hour, the immortal scion of his great house, Riser Phoenix, and his powerful, undefeated peerage. Another screen appeared, showing Riser's smug face and the 15 members of his household. The announcer's voice boomed again. The rules are simple. Victory is achieved when the opposing king either resigns or is retired. Let the game begin. A deep, resonant gong sounded, signaling the start of the match. Instantly, the orc members moved, executing the first phase of the plan with perfect precision. Rias and Akeno flared their demonic signatures and headed for the gymnasium. Kiba and Koneko sprinted toward the front gate. Issei, with a nervous gulp, made for the maintenance shed. Clamping down on his aura as Naruto had taught him. Naruto himself simply closed his eyes. He bit his thumb, drew a smear of blood on the ground, and slammed his palm down. Summoning Jutsu. A vast, complex seal spread out beneath him, but it wasn't for a giant toad. In 10 simultaneous puffs of smoke, 10 shadow clones appeared around him. They weren't the simple duplicates he used for reconnaissance. These were solid, battle-ready clones, each possessing a significant portion of his chakra. You know the mission, the real Naruto said. The clones nodded in unison. Spread out. Establish a sensory network. Identify their positions. Harass, distract, but do not engage in prolonged combat. Cause chaos. And then they were gone, vanishing into the shadows of the school buildings. With a silence and speed that was utterly inhuman. The real Naruto took a deep breath, sinking into sage mode. The world exploded into a symphony of sensory information. The orange pigmentation appeared around his eyes. And he could feel everything, the life energy of every tree, the thrum of demonic power from Rias's location, the faint traces of Riser's peerage spreading out across the campus. He was no longer just a piece on the board. He was the board itself. At the front gate, Kiba and Koneko stood their ground. Moments later, 4 of Riser's pawns, all female warriors in revealing armor, appeared before them. Smirks on their faces. Look what we have here, one of them sneered. The little knight and the tiny rook. Your king must be desperate, sending just two of you. Kiba drew his sword. You'll find we're more than enough. He charged, a blur of motion, engaging three of them at once. His blade was a silver whirlwind, forcing them onto the defensive. But he was outnumbered, and they were coordinated. As he parried a strike from his left, another pawn lunged at his exposed back. Suddenly, a blur of white shot past him. Koneko, her small fists glowing with power, intercepted the attack with a brutal cross-body block, sending the pawn flying backward into a tree. My back, Koneko stated simply, her eyes fixed on Kiba. Kiba smiled. And I've got yours. The battle was joined. Kiba's speed and Koneko's power made them a formidable duo, but they were taking a beating. This was exactly what Naruto had planned. They were the perfect distraction, a noisy, flashy battle that drew all the attention. High above, concealed by a cloud, Akeno watched the unfolding scene. A small, almost invisible toad, one of Naruto's messengers, sat on her shoulder. Hold your position, Akeno, Naruto's voice echoed in her mind. A telepathic link forged through sage art. Their main force is bypassing the front gate. They're splitting into 3 teams, heading for the gym. Understood, Akeno whispered, her eyes scanning the ground below. She could now see them, 3 squads moving with military precision, flanking the main building. Riser wasn't a fool. The frontal assault was just a probe. Koneko. Naruto's voice was now in the rook's mind. Their rook, a large woman named Rias, is breaking from the main group. She's circling around the back of the old school building. She's coming for you. Koneko, in the middle of her fight, didn't react visibly, but she processed the information. She dodged a spear thrust, her mind already shifting gears. Let Kiba handle the pawns, Naruto instructed. Lead her into the building. The second floor, classroom 3B. I have a surprise for her. Koneko broke from the main fight with a powerful stomp that cracked the pavement, immediately sprinting towards the old building. As predicted, a tall, powerfully built woman with a massive battle axe detached from one of the flanking squads to give chase. Inside the building, the halls were dark and silent. Koneko darted up the stairs, her small size giving her an agility her larger pursuer couldn't match. She burst into classroom 3B and took a defensive stance in the center of the room. A moment later, Rias crashed through the door, a cruel grin on her face. Nowhere left to run, little girl, she snarled, hefting her axe. I'm going to enjoy breaking you. She charged. Koneko stood her ground, her fists raised. She remembered Naruto's words from the training yard. Power starts here. She planted her feet, felt the connection to the ground beneath her. As the massive Ook swung her axe in a devastating downward arc, Koneko didn't try to block it. At that exact moment, a Naruto clone dropped from its hiding spot in the ceiling rafters directly behind Rias. The clone didn't attack. It clapped its hands together, once. The sharp sound was all the distraction needed. Rias's eyes flickered in surprise, her concentration breaking for a split second. It was more than enough. Koneko exploded into motion. She sidestepped the axe, which buried itself in the floorboards where she had been standing. And as she moved, she twisted her hip, channeling all her power, all her momentum. All her will into a single, rising uppercut. Her tiny fist, glowing with an immense concentration of Tuki, slammed into Rias's chin. The impact was cataclysmic. There was a sound like a thunderclap. And the much larger woman was lifted clean off her feet. She shot upward, crashed through the ceiling, and continued through the roof of the old school building before her unconscious body finally arced back down, landing in a heap in the courtyard outside. Announcer. One of Riser Phoenix's rooks has been retired. Koneko stared at her fist, then at the massive hole in the ceiling. A look of pure astonishment on her face. The Naruto clone gave her a thumbs up before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Meanwhile, Riser's main force was converging on the gymnasium. His queen, Ubeluna, led one squad. His 2 knights, Carlamine, now recovered, and Cyrus, led the others. They surrounded the building, their faces confident. She's in there, Ubeluna said, pointing a thumb at the gym. The power signature is unmistakable. All units, prepare to breach on my command. Inside the gym, Rias stood alone, a massive power of destruction barrier swirling around her. It was an impressive display, but a bluff. She was concentrating all her energy into making it look strong, leaving her with few reserves for an actual fight. Suddenly, Naruto's voice was in her head, calm and reassuring. Rias. Get ready to move. Now. Single quote. Just as Ubeluna gave the command to attack, the gymnasium exploded. Not from their attack, but from within. A massive eruption of holy lightning, impossibly large and brilliant, tore the roof off the building and vaporized the front wall. Akeno, swooping down from the clouds, had unleashed her full fury. The coordinated attack of Riser's peerage was thrown into chaos. They shielded their eyes from the blinding light, their formations breaking as they were hammered by stray bolts of lightning. Announcer. Astounding. Akeno Himahima has revealed her position with a devastating opening salvo. Quote. In the confusion, Rias dashed out from the side of the ruined building, a Naruto clone appearing beside her, grabbing her arm, and pulling her into the shadows of the nearby forest before anyone could get a lock on her position. The powerful demonic signature they had been tracking vanished as Rias suppressed it. Ubeluna snarled in frustration, realizing they had been tricked. It was a trap. Find the king. Find Grimoire. Her squad was about to give chase when several things happened at once. From the trees, a volley of kunai with smoking paper tags attached rained down on them. They were paper bombs, and they detonated in a series of concussive blasts that, while not powerful enough to retire them, were disorienting and painful. At the same time, Naruto's voice rang in Issei's mind. Now, Issei. The bishop. On your left. Issei, who had been waiting with his heart pounding in his chest, burst from the maintenance shed. He saw one of Riser's bishops, a young woman named Mahai, who had been focused on the exploding gym. She was completely exposed. Boost. 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 Issei roared, the boosted gear flaring to life. He wasn't just yelling now. He was pulling the power from his core, just as Naruto had instructed. He felt the surge, a torrent of draconic energy flowing into him. He didn't even try for a fancy move. He just charged, tackling her with all his might. The boosted strength was enough to knock her off her feet and send her crashing into a wall, retiring her from the match. Anunk, what is this? Riser Phoenix loses a bishop. The pawn, Issei Hyodo. With a surprise attack. Issei stood there, panting, a grin of pure triumph on his face. He had done it. He had followed the plan and taken out a key piece. His victory was short-lived. Carlamine and Cyrus, Riser's two knights, appeared on either side of him in a blur of motion. You'll pay for that, you little worm. Before they could strike, Kiba was there, his sword. Da silver arc deflecting both of their attacks. Your fight is with me. He was now facing two knights at once, a desperate situation. Kiba, Naruto's voice cut through the clash of steel. Their movements are synchronized. Carlamine always attacks high, Cyrus goes low. There's a half-second gap after their third combo strike. Use it. Kiba's eyes widened. Naruto was seeing the entire battle, analyzing their fighting patterns in real time. He focused, parrying their relentless assault, counting the strikes. 1, 2, 3. In the fractional gap Naruto had identified, Kiba dropped low, sweeping Cyrus's legs out from under him. And in the same fluid motion, spun up, creating a dozen sword phantoms with his sword birth ability, impaling the off-balance Carlamine. Announcer. Unbelievable. A knight from House Phoenix is retired. Cyrus, enraged, lunged at Kiba, but from the sky, a bolt of holy lightning struck the ground before him, forcing him back. Akeno had joined the fray. The battle field had been turned into a perfectly executed series of ambushes and coordinated strikes, all orchestrated by a single, unseen mind. In a lavishly decorated viewing box, high above the arena, several high-ranking devils watched the match on a massive crystal orb. Sears X Lucifer was there, a small, proud smile on his face. Lord and Lady Grimoire watched with breathless anxiety. And sitting in a shadowed corner was Lord Baal, the head of the Great King Pillar of the 72, a man known for his stern demeanor and traditionalist views. He watched the match not with excitement, but with a cold, analytical gaze. This is no rating game. He murmured to his aide. This is a dissection. The Grimoire girl's fiancé, he is not fighting them. He is taking them apart. His strategy is flawless, my lord, the aide agreed. It is not his strategy that concerns me, Baal said, his eyes narrowing as he focused on a brief glimpse of Naruto, a flicker of orange in the chaos. It is his energy. When he taps into that natural power, it feels clean, pure. It is anathema to the very foundation of our demonic power. More than that, he trailed off, a flicker of something almost like fear in his eyes. It is anathema to the void. An energy like that should not exist in our cosmos. It is a threat not just to us, but to the fundamental balance of all things. The aide looked confused, but Lord Bale said no more. His attention fixed on the orb, his mind racing with possibilities he found deeply disturbing. Back on the field, Riser Phoenix was finally losing his composure. He stood on the roof of the main school building, watching his peerage being dismantled one by one. He had lost a rook, a bishop, and a knight, along with several pawns. The Grimoire team was almost untouched. Incompetent fools. He roared. His body wreathed in orange flames. Where is he? Where is that damned human? As if in answer, a voice spoke from directly behind him. Looking for me. Riser spun around. Naruto was standing there, his arms crossed. His expression calm. He hadn't made a sound. Riser's rage turned into a triumphant, cruel smile. Finally. The little rat shows his face. Did you enjoy hiding while your friends fought for you? Your tricks are over. Now you face true power. You face immortality. He unleashed a torrent of fire, a massive wave of golden flame that consumed the entire rooftop. It was hot enough to melt steel. A roaring inferno of Phoenix power. When the flames died down, Naruto was gone. A charred log lay where he had been standing. A cheap trick. Riser sneered. You're right, Naruto's voice said. This time from his left. Riser turned to see him leaning casually against the rooftop railing. Substitution is a pretty basic skill. Enraged, Riser charged, his fist wreathed in fire. Naruto met the charge. His movements fluid and precise. He dodged, weaved, and blocked, using Riser's own momentum against him, redirecting his powerful blows with minimal effort. It was a masterclass in taijutsu. Stand still and fight me. Riser roared, his frustration mounting. Okay, Naruto said simply. He stopped moving, planting his feet. In his palm, a Rasengan swirled to life. Riser saw his chance and lunged, aiming a fiery punch straight at Naruto's heart. Naruto met the attack with his own, slamming the Rasengan into Riser's chest. The impact sent Riser flying across the roof, his suit shredded, a gaping spiral wound in his chest. But even as he flew, the wound began to close, orange flames knitting his flesh back together. He landed on his feet, laughing. Did you really think that would work? He crowed, his chest already fully healed. I am a Phoenix. I am immortal. You cannot defeat me. Any wound you inflict, I will simply regenerate. I know, Naruto said calmly. He closed his eyes. That's why I was just gathering data. When he opened them again, the orange pigmentation of the perfect sage was framing his eyes. The air around him changed. It wasn't just demonic energy or chakra anymore. A new power, immense, ancient, and overwhelming, descended upon the battlefield. It was the power of the planet itself, a pure, natural energy that felt fundamentally alien in this demonic dimension. Riser's confident smirk faltered. The very air felt heavy, and the energy radiating from Naruto felt wrong. It felt like poison to his demonic nature. Now, Naruto said, his voice carrying a new, deeper resonance. The real fight begins. He vanished. He didn't use a jutsu. He was simply so fast that Riser couldn't track his movement. A fist, glowing with the faint golden light of natural energy, slammed into Riser's jaw. The force was incredible, but that wasn't the worst part. Where the fist connected, the flames of regeneration sputtered and died. A raw, painful bruise formed on Riser's jaw. And it wasn't healing. What did you do? Riser stammered, touching his face in shock. Sage mode, Naruto explained, his voice devoid of its earlier warmth. It uses natural energy. It seems your demonic regeneration doesn't know how to handle it. It disrupts the process. In other words, against me, your immortality is useless. The fear that had briefly touched Riser in the clubroom returned. 100 times stronger. He was facing a being who had just stripped him of his greatest advantage. Desperate, he unleashed his full power, transforming into a fiery, winged figure. I am a phoenix. I will burn you to ash. He shrieked, launching himself into the air and diving down in a blazing meteor strike. Naruto didn't move to counter. He simply dropped to one knee, placing his palm on the rooftop. As he channeled his chakra, intricate black lines, like ink in water, spread out from his hand, forming a massive, complex sealing formula that covered the entire rooftop in seconds. An Uzumaki 4 symbol seal. Just as Riser was about to impact, Naruto looked up, his sage eyes glowing. Checkmate. The seal flared with a brilliant, white light. When Riser's fiery form struck it, there was no explosion. The seal acted like a vortex, sucking in all the flame, all the power, all the kinetic energy. Riser was slammed onto the seal, and the black lines began to crawl up his body. Glowing runes that bound his limbs and sapped his strength. He struggled, but it was useless. The seal was absolute, draining his demonic energy and leaving him completely paralyzed. He wasn't dead. He wasn't even seriously injured. He was just beaten. Completely and utterly neutralized. The announcer's voice, for the first time, was filled with stunned silence. Foe. A long moment before it finally stuttered. Our Riser Phoenix has been immobilized. He is unable to continue. The winner is the House of Grimoire. A profound silence fell over the entire dimension. Then, from the ground below, a cheer erupted. Kiba, Akeno, Koneko, and Issei were looking up, their faces a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and pure, unadulterated awe. Naruto stood up, the sage mode receding. He looked down at the defeated, powerless Riser Phoenix, trapped in the Uzumaki seal. He hadn't killed him. He hadn't even needed to truly harm him. He had simply won, intelligently and absolutely. He looked over at the holographic screen high above, which now showed Rias's face, tears of joy and relief streaming down her cheeks. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. She wasn't a political prize. She wasn't the Grimoire heir. She was Rias. And she had won. Her victory had been secured by the strange, unpredictable, and unbelievably brilliant young man who had come from another world. The man who was, in name, her fiancé. But who was quickly becoming so much more. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Scars We Share. The ringing silence that followed the announcer's declaration was more profound than any sound. In the wrecked arena that was once a perfect replica of their school, the members of the Occult Research Club stood panting, bruised, and utterly victorious. Issei was slumped against a wall, grinning like an idiot despite his exhaustion. Kiba leaned on his sword, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but his eyes were bright. Koneko was quietly munching on a victory chocolate bar. Her usual stoicism tinged with an undeniable air of pride. High above, Naruto dispelled the sealing formula with a wave of his hand, releasing a sputtering, powerless Riser Phoenix. He didn't spare the defeated devil another glance. His gaze was on his team, his comrades, and a genuine, warm smile spread across his face. He gave them a thumbs up before leaping from the rooftop, landing in their midst as lightly as a falling leaf. Before anyone could speak, they were engulfed in crimson light. A Grimoire transport circle flared to life, and from it stepped Rias. She didn't hesitate. She ran the last few feet and threw her arms around Naruto, her body trembling with the force of her relief. You did it, she whispered into his shoulder, her voice thick with unshed tears. You actually did it. Naruto was momentarily startled by the sudden embrace, but then he relaxed, patting her back gently. We did it, he corrected her. You all fought like hell. I just pointed you in the right direction. The rest of the peerage converged, a wave of relief and celebration washing over them. Akeno's usual teasing smile was back, but it was softer, more genuine. Asia was openly crying with joy. And even Koneko offered a rare, tiny smile. They were a team. A real team. Their celebration was interrupted by the arrival of two more transport circles. The first brought Searsex and Graphia. The great Satan's usual calm composure was gone, replaced by a broad, unrestrained grin of pride. That, Searsex said, his voice booming with admiration as he looked at Naruto, was the single most brilliant display of strategy I have witnessed in centuries. You have not only won, you have redefined what is possible in a rating game. From the second circle emerged an older, yet still strikingly handsome man with the same crimson hair as Rias and Searsex, and a beautiful woman with warm brown hair who carried herself with an air of quiet dignity. Lord Zeoticus and Lady Venelana Grimoire. Rias immediately stiffened, her joy dimming slightly. Father. Mother. Zeoticus Grimoire's eyes were fixed on Naruto, his expression a complex mixture of awe, relief, and a deep, unsettling apprehension. He had approved the summoning of a powerful being to act as a shield for his daughter. He had not anticipated a force of nature that could dismantle a high-class devil's peerage with the casual ease of a master chess player sweeping the pieces from the board. This was not a shield. This was a weapon of world-altering potential, and he had brought it into his home. You have our gratitude, Uzumaki Naruto. Zeoticus said, his voice a low baritone that held the weight of his station. He bowed his head, a gesture of profound respect that stunned his daughter and her peerage. You have saved my daughter from a fate she did not desire and have brought great honor to our house. Benelana, however, was looking at something else. Her perceptive eyes saw past the politics and the power. She saw the way her daughter had embraced Naruto, the genuine warmth in Akeno's smile, the quiet trust in Kaneko's posture. She saw the bonds that were already forming, bonds far stronger than any contract. She stepped forward, her expression gentle. We are all in your debt, she said to Naruto, her voice warm. But for now, these children are exhausted and injured. They have earned a rest. She turned her gaze to Rias's peerage. And her smile was that of a proud mother. You all fought beautifully. I am so proud of you. Under the combined authority of the Grimoire parents and Searsex, the post-match formalities were handled swiftly. Riser's peerage was collected, and a shell-shocked and deeply humbled Riser was taken before the council to officially annul the engagement contract. The news of his defeat, and the manner of it, would spread through the underworld like wildfire. The Grimoire name was more secure than ever, but it was now tied to a mysterious, orange-clad variable that no one could predict or control. A few days later, a fragile sense of normalcy had returned. Kuo Academy was just a school again. The students gossiped about the mysterious transfer student, Naruto Uzumaki, and his apparent closeness to the school's idols, Rias Grimoire and Akeno Himehime, but it was just high school rumor. They had no idea of the cosmic battles being waged in the shadows. For Naruto, the return to routine was a welcome respite. The victory had solidified his place within the group. He was no longer just a guardian, he was a friend, a mentor, a trusted leader. But he noticed a subtle shift in Akeno. Her teasing was still present, but it was more subdued, her smiles occasionally failing to reach her eyes. He would catch her staring off into the distance, a flicker of omething dark and painful in their violet depths before she would notice him looking and mask it with a flirtatious wink. He knew that expression. He had seen it in the mirror often enough in his youth. It was the look of someone wrestling with a part of themselves they hated. One evening, after club activities had ended, he sensed her aura not heading home, but towards the Shinto shrine on the hill overlooking the town. It was a place of holy energy, a place that should have been painful for a devil to be near. Intrigued and a little concerned, he followed, his presence masked as he moved through the trees. He found her standing under the great Torii gate, looking out at the setting sun as it painted the town in hues of orange and gold. She wore her school uniform, but she seemed smaller, more vulnerable. Without her usual seductive confidence. She wasn't smiling. Naruto didn't sneak up on her. He made his presence known by stepping on a dry twig, the sharp snap echoing in the quiet air. She didn't startle. She turned her head slightly, her long black ponytail catching the last rays of sunlight. I knew you'd follow me, Naruto-kun. Are you that worried about me? The teasing was there, but it was fragile. Like a pane of glass threatening to crack. He walked up to stand beside her, leaning against the wooden pillar of the gate. He didn't answer her question directly. Instead, he looked out at the view. It's a nice spot. Peaceful. My mother used to bring me here, Akeno said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. She was a priestess. This was her home. Naruto remained silent, giving her the space to continue. He knew this was important. She was human, Akeno went on, her gaze distant. She fell in love with a man who was not a fallen angel. A cadre class leader named Barakiel. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion, as she spoke the name. They had me. A half-breed. A monster in the eyes of both sides. She finally turned to face him, and the mask was gone. Her violet eyes were swimming with a pain so deep it seemed to pull all the light from the air. When my mother was killed by her fellow humans for loving a fallen angel, he wasn't there. My father, he never came for me. He abandoned me. Left me to die. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. Rias Chan's father found me, gave me a home. But I never forgot. I hate him. I hate the fallen angel blood that flows in my veins. This power I have. She held up her hand, and a small, brilliant spark of holy lightning crackled between her fingers. His power. Every time I use it, it feels like I'm becoming him. It feels filthy. Her flirtatious, sadistic persona, Naruto realized, was all a defense. A way to take control of the darkness she felt within her, to wield the part of herself she loathed so it couldn't control her. In the rating game, she had unleashed that power to help them win, and the victory had come at the cost of reopening that old, festering wound. Naruto listened to it all, his expression unchanging. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't say, "I'm sorry for your loss," or, "You should try to forgive him." He knew how hollow those words would sound. When she finished, a heavy silence fell between them. Akeno looked away, a flicker of shame on her face, as if she regretted revealing so much. "When I was a kid," Naruto said quietly, his voice drawing her attention back to him. "Everyone in my village hated me. They wouldn't look at me. The shopkeepers would sell me rotten food. The other parents would pull their children away when I came near, whispering things like, 'demon,' and 'monster.'" Akeno's eyes widened slightly. This wasn't the story of a celebrated hero. "I didn't know why," he continued, his gaze fixed on the town below, on memories a world away. "I just knew I was alone. I'd pull pranks. Paint the Hokage monument, anything to get them to see me, to scream my name, even if they were angry. Because being yelled at was better than being invisible." He looked at her. And his blue eyes held a depth of understanding that went beyond mere sympathy. "There was a monster sealed inside me on the day I was born. The nine-tailed fox. It had almost destroyed the village years before. To them, I wasn't a boy. I was the fox. I was the cage, and I was the monster inside it. Everything they hated, everything they feared, it was me." He held up his own hand, channeling a wisp of Kurama's reddish-orange chakra. It danced around his fingers, a stark contrast to the holy lightning Akeno had summoned. It was raw, powerful, and to many, terrifying. This power. It saved my life 100 times. It saved my friends, my village, the whole world. But for years, every time I used it, I felt that hatred from everyone else. I felt like I was proving them right. That I really was just a monster losing control. He let the chakra dissipate. "We're not so different, Akeno," he said, his voice soft but firm. "We both have a power inside us that we didn't ask for. A legacy from a parent that caused us nothing but pain. People looked at you and saw a fallen angel's daughter. They looked at me and saw a Jinchuriki. They never bothered to look for Akeno Himehime or Naruto Uzumaki." Akeno was staring at him, her lips slightly parted. The tears were flowing freely now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of a profound, soul-shaking relief. He didn't pity her. He didn't judge her. He understood. He had walked the same lonely path, just in a different world. He saw her, the real her, buried beneath the titles of half-breed, devil, and sadist. "What you do with that power," Naruto said, his gaze intense, "that's what defines you. Not where it came from. You used your holy lightning to protect Rias, to protect all of us. That wasn't your father's act. That was yours. Your strength. Your choice." He reached out, not to offer a hug or a comforting touch, but simply placed his hand on top of her head, a gesture of simple, honest affection. "The power isn't a curse unless you let it be. It's just a part of you. Just like the fox is a part of me." She finally broke. A sob escaped her, a raw, wounded sound she had probably held back for years. She stepped forward and buried her face in his chest, her arms wrapping around his waist, holding on as if he were the only solid thing in a world that was falling apart. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her securely, providing a silent, steady strength. They stood there for a long time as the sun sank below the horizon, casting the shrine in twilight. The flirty queen of the Grem. Ori peerage and the hero of the elemental nations, two lonely souls finding a moment of perfect understanding in their shared scars. When Akeno finally pulled back, her eyes were red-rimmed but clear. The deep-seated pain replaced by a fragile, new light. She looked up at him, and her smile was the most genuine he had ever seen from her. "Thank you, Naruto-kun. Anytime," he said simply. The dynamic between them had changed. Irrevocably. The foundation of intrigue had been replaced by one of genuine intimacy and trust. She no longer saw just a pillar of power, she saw a kindred spirit, the RST person who had ever looked at all the broken pieces of her and not tried to fix them, but had simply shown her the scars he shared. Miles away, deep in the underworld, in a lavish, shadowed estate, belonging to a minor but ancient noble house, a devil in the robes of a political aide stood before his master. The Grimoire girl is free of the Phoenix contract, my lord, the aide reported, his head bowed. His master, a gaunt, ancient-looking devil named Lord Zapar, sat in a high-backed chair, his fingers steepled before him. He was a forgotten pillar, a recluse who hadn't been involved in politics for centuries. No one knew he was now one of the highest-ranking silencers in Erebus's service. And the anomaly, Uzumaki? Zapar asked, his voice a dry rustle of old parchment. His power is as the master predicted, the aide said. It is an energy of life, of creation. The perfect antithesis to our Lord's great work of silence. It disrupted the Phoenix's regenerative abilities completely. The old guard is already whispering. Bale and his traditionalists see it as a threat to the purity of the demonic line. Good, Zapar rasped. Let their fear fester. But we must not allow them to focus on the boy. We need them looking elsewhere. He paused, his cold eyes glinting in the gloom. Lord Glacia Labalas has been making inquiries into the energy fluctuations from the human world for weeks. He is a meticulous researcher. Too meticulous. What are your orders, my lord? The aide asked, his voice unwavering. He has a meeting with a faction of the old Satan loyalists tomorrow night. A clandestine affair, Zapar said. Arrange for an unfortunate accident. A magical misfire. Make it look as though the loyalists silenced him for getting too close to their plans. Let Searzex and his allies focus on a phantom civil war. It will provide the perfect cover for our own preparations. It will be done, my lord, the aide said. He bowed once more and retreated, a shadow melting into other shadows. Lord Zapar stared into the crackling fireplace, a cruel, thin smile on his lips. While the children played their games and healed their emotional wounds, the real work, the grand and final work of unmaking existence, continued quietly in the dark. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. An unholy sword and a fallen star. The victory over Riser Phoenix had bought them peace, but it was a fragile, fleeting thing. In the world of devils and gods, tranquility was merely the deep breath taken before the next plunge into chaos. The first sign that this peace was about to shatter arrived not with a demon. I see summoning circle or a fiery explosion, but with the quiet, determined footsteps of two young women walking up the path to the occult research club. Naruto sensed them long before they were visible. Two distinct auras, sharp and militant. Pulsing with an energy that felt like finely honed steel. It was holy power, but wielded with the precision of a soldier, not the gentle faith of a healer like Asia. He was sitting with the others in the clubroom, listening to Issei recount an exaggerated version of his victory over Riser's bishop for the 10th time, when he suddenly held up a hand for silence. We've got company, he said. His voice low. The others tensed immediately, their light-hearted mood evaporating. They trusted his senses implicitly. Rias moved to the window, her brow furrowed. Who is it? Two of them. Naruto replied, his eyes closed as he focused. Human. Strong. Wielding holy energy. They feel dangerous. As if on cue, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed on the clubroom door. Kiba, ever the knight, moved to answer it, his hand resting near where he could summon his sword in an instant. When he opened the door, they saw two girls in the distinctive uniform of a different local school. One had blue hair with a single green streak, her expression stern and all business. She carried a large object wrapped in white cloth on her back. The other had long, light brown hair tied in twin tails. And her face was a mixture of nervous energy and righteous zeal. Can we help you? Kiba asked, his tone polite but guarded. We are here to see the devils of the Grimoire peerage, the blue-haired girl stated. Her voice cold and direct. She bypassed Kiba and stepped into the room, her analytical gaze sweeping over each of them, lingering for a moment on Asia, who flinched under the intensity. My name is Zenobia Quarta. This is Irina Shido. We are agents of the Holy Church. The words dropped into the room with the weight of a declaration of war. The church and the devils were, at best, in a cold, tense truce. Their agents appearing on Grimoire territory was a profound breach of protocol. The church, Rias said, stepping forward, her regal authority taking over. You are a long way from home, exorcists. State your purpose. Zenovia's eyes narrowed. Our purpose is to retrieve stolen property. 3 fragments of the holy sword Excalibur were stolen from our vaults. Our intelligence indicates the thieves are operating in this town, and that they may be in league with the fallen angels. She looked pointedly around the room. We are here to deliver a warning. Do not interfere with our hunt. The enemies of God are our enemies, and we will eliminate any who stand in our way, be they fallen or devil. Her gaze fell on Naruto last. She saw a young man in an orange and black tracksuit lounging on the couch, looking utterly unintimidated. He didn't radiate the foul energy of a devil, but he was clearly aligned with them. To her, that made him just as guilty. Irina, the brown-haired girl, spoke up. Her voice surprisingly cheerful despite the tense atmosphere. What Zenovia means is, we'd really appreciate it if you'd stay out of our way. We're on a mission from God, after all. Before Rias could respond to the blatant provocation, Naruto spoke from the couch, his voice deceptively casual. Holy swords, huh? Sounds important. You sure you two can handle it alone? Zenovia's head snapped towards him, her eyes flashing with anger. We are the wielders of the holy swords Durandal and Excalibur mimic. We are more than capable. We do not require the assistance, or the commentary of a devil's pet. Naruto chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. That's a new one. Last week I was a mutated pawn piece. I'm moving up in the world. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Kiba, however, had gone completely still, his face pale. The name, Excalibur, had struck him like a physical blow. He stared at Zenovia and Irina, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Excalibur, he whispered, his voice shaking with a cold, repressed fury that startled everyone. So, the Holy Sword Project, it continues. Zenovia looked at him, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. You know of the project. I was a part of it, Kiba spat, his usual calm demeanor gone, replaced by a raw, burning hatred. One of the dozens of children you experimented on. Trying to create artificial wielders. I was the only one who survived the ritual. The only one who escaped before you disposed of the failures. The revelation hung in the air, thick and horrifying. Asia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Irina's cheerful facade crumbled, her face paling with shock and guilt. She had heard whispers of the dark past of the project, but had dismissed them as anti-church propaganda. Zenovia's stern expression tightened, a flicker of discomfort in her eyes. That project was a sin, a perversion of God's will, she said, her voice tight. It was shut down years ago by the current administration. We had no part in it. But you still carry the swords that were the goal of all that suffering, Kiba countered, his voice dripping with venom. You benefit from their sacrifices. He took a step forward, his demonic power beginning to swirl around him. Give me those swords. The situation was about to explode into violence when a new presence slammed into Naruto's senses. It was an overwhelming wave of malice and power, descending on the school like a physical weight. It dwarfed Riser Phoenix. It was an order of magnitude beyond anything they had faced before. Naruto, outside. Now. Kurama's voice roared in his mind. This one's a big one. Smells like a crow who's forgotten his place. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, his casual demeanor gone. Replaced by the sharp focus of a seasoned warrior. Everyone, outside. Now. Bigger problems just showed up. His tone was so urgent, so absolute, that it cut through the personal conflict. Rias, Kiba, and even the 2 exorcists knew that whatever was happening, it was a greater threat than their current standoff. They all poured out of the clubroom and into the school courtyard. The sky above Kuo Academy was darkening. Not with clouds, but with a palpable aura of darkness. Floating high above the school, silhouetted against the twilight, was a figure with 10 black, feathered wings. He was dressed in the robes of a priest, a cruel, mocking smile on his face. The sheer pressure of his aura was immense, a suffocating blanket of corrupt holy power. Greetings, little devils of the Grimoire clan. The fallen angel boomed, his voice dripping with condescension. And I see a couple of God's little messengers have come out to play as well. How wonderful. It saves me the trouble of hunting you all down. Zenovia's eyes widened in horror. 10 wings, a cadre class leader. That's Kokobile. Kokobile, one of the original leaders of the Grigori, a veteran of the Great War, and a notorious warmonger. Correct. Kokobile laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. I must admit, I'm terribly bored. This truce is so dreadfully dull. There's no passion, no glory, no magnificent destruction. So, I decided to start a little party of my own. I stole the Excaliburs to lure the church, and I've come to this town to kill the heirs of both Grimoire and Citri. With two great devil fam. Eily's crippled and the church's prized swords in my possession, surely that will be enough to kickstart our glorious war once more. His insane pronouncement echoed across the grounds. This wasn't just an attack. It was an attempt to plunge the entire supernatural world back into a catastrophic war. As he spoke, the ground began to tremble. Dozens of magic circles erupted across the school grounds, and from them emerged monstrous three-headed dogs the size of horses. Their eyes glowed with hellfire, and their guttural snarls were the sound of pure savagery. Cerberus hounds, Rias breathed, her face pale. An army of them. Kokobile laughed again. Enjoy my pets. I'll be watching from above. The hounds charged. The situation was dire. The Occult Research Club, plus 2 exorcists, against a cadre-class fallen angel and an army of monsters. It was a suicide mission. Panic began to set in. Everyone, get back. Form a defensive circle. Rias shouted, trying to take control. It's no use. We're outnumbered. Zenobia yelled, drawing her massive sword, Durandal, from its wrappings. It blazed with a pure, holy light. But through the rising panic, one voice cut through, calm, authoritative, and absolute. Enough. It was Naruto. He stepped forward, planting himself between the charging hounds and the others. He wasn't yelling, but his voice carried an unshakable command that made everyone pause. He took in the entire battlefield in a single, sweeping glance, the hounds, the rogue fallen angels now appearing in the sky, and Kokobile laughing high above. This is not a debate club, he said, his back to them. His eyes fixed on the enemy. This is a battlefield. You will listen to me, or you will die. Rias, Akeno, you're on aerial defense. Keep those other fallen off our heads. Don't let them support Kokobile. Right. They both responded, taking to the sky without hesitation. Kiba, Zenobia, he ordered, and the two sworn enemies flinched at being paired together. I don't care about your history right now. You are my left flank. You are both sword masters. Work together. Keep the hounds from circling around that side. Irina, Issei. You're the right flank. Issei, you're the tank. Use your boosted gear to punch holes in their lines. Irina, your Excalibur is about speed, right? You support him, keep him from getting overwhelmed. Koneko, Asia. You're with me in the center. Koneko, you're my hammer. When I create an opening, you smash whatever's in it. Asia, you stay behind us and heal anyone who goes down. You are the most important person on this field. Do not get hit. He hadn't asked. He had commanded. In the space of 10 seconds, he had assessed their strengths, weaknesses, and assigned them roles, transforming a panicked mob into a cohesive military unit. His sheer, unshakable confidence was infectious, stamping out their fear and replacing it with a grim sense of purpose. And me, he said, cracking his knuckles as the first wave of Cerberus hounds closed in. I'm the main event. He slammed his hands together in a familiar seal. Shadow clone jutsu. In a massive cloud of smoke, 50 Naruto clones exploded into existence. Half of you, protect the school. Put up a barrier. Evacuate any civilians still inside. The other half, you're with me. Let's clear some room. The clones roared a battle cry and charged, slamming into the wave of Cerberus hounds with a flurry of Rasengans. Kicks, and punches. The battlefield erupted into utter chaos, but now it was a controlled chaos. Each member of their makeshift army was fighting with a purpose, a role. A strategy dictated by the man in the center of the storm. Naruto, the original, stood watching for a moment, his sage senses mapping the entire conflict. He saw Kiba and Zenobia clashing swords with each other almost as much as the enemy, their hatred getting in the way. He saw Issei fighting with courage but little technique, getting overwhelmed. He saw Akeno's lightning being countered by the Fallen's light spears. This wasn't working. They were buying time, but they were losing. He closed his eyes. Kurama. It's time to get serious. Hey, I was waiting for you to say that, the fox rumbled in his mind. A new power exploded from Naruto, a wave of golden energy that washed over the entire battlefield. It was warm, vibrant, and unbelievably powerful. A cloak of brilliant, yellow chakra enveloped him. flowing like flames, markings of the Sage of Six Paths appearing on his collar. He had entered his ultimate form. Six Paths Sage Mode. Kokobile, who had been watching the spectacle with amused detachment, suddenly stopped laughing. His eyes widened, his arrogant smile vanishing. What is that energy? It's not demonic, it's not holy, it feels like the beginning of all things. Naruto opened his eyes. They were no longer just blue. They were the golden, cross-slitted eyes of a sage, radiating an ancient and overwhelming power. He vanished from his spot on the ground, appearing in a golden flash directly in front of Kokobile, thousands of feet in the air. Kokobile instinctively threw up a shield of dark energy. Naruto didn't even bother with a jutsu. He just punched. His fist, glowing with golden chakra, shattered the shield like glass and slammed into the fallen angel's stomach. The force of the blow was absolute. Kokobile choked, the air driven from his lungs. His eyes bulging in disbelief as he was sent hurtling back towards the ground like a cannonball. He crashed into the courtyard with enough force to create a massive crater, shattering the earth. ND sending his own Cerberus hounds flying. Naruto floated down slowly, landing on the edge of the crater. The entire battlefield had fallen silent. His clones, the orc members, the exorcists, and the remaining fallen angels all stared. Utterly dumbfounded. He had just taken down a cadre class leader with a single punch. From the bottom of the crater, Kokobile staggered to his feet, clutching his stomach, blood trickling from his lips. His face was a mask of furious disbelief. What are you? No human should have that kind of power. I'm just a guy who hates seeing people mess with my friends, Naruto said. His voice echoing with the power of his new form. He raised his hand, and a black receiver rod, a tool of the Six Paths, materialized in his grip. The game's over, Kokobile. Surrender. With a desperate, enraged scream, Kokobile summoned a massive spear of pure light, a weapon capable of leveling a city block. I will not be beaten by some unknown whelp. I will restart the Great War. He hurled the spear. It flew through the air with a deafening shriek, a bolt of pure, divine destruction. Naruto didn't move to dodge it. He held up his hand, and a miniature Rasenshuriken, black and swirling with wind chakra, formed above his palm. He flicked it forward. The tiny shuriken met the colossal spear of light head-on. There was no grand explosion. The Rasenshuriken simply expanded, its microscopic wind blades shredding the spear of light on a molecular level, unmaking it from the inside out until there was nothing left. Kokobile stared, his last-ditch effort dissolving into nothing. It was then that he truly understood. He was not fighting a man. He was fighting a fundamental law of nature. It was like a child trying to punch a hurricane. Naruto appeared before him in another golden flash. Before Kokobile could even react, Naruto drove the black receiver into his shoulder, pinning him to the crater wall and completely disrupting his flow of power. He was helpless. The battle was over. The remaining fallen angels, seeing their leader defeated so utterly, fled into the night. The Cerberus hounds dissolved back into shadows. Silence descended once more. Rias and the others slowly approached the crater, their eyes wide with an awe that bordered on fear. The sheer scale of power Naruto had just displayed was beyond their comprehension. Zenobia was the first to speak, her voice trembling slightly. He's defeated. We must take him back to the church for judgment. No, Rias countered, her voice hard. He attacked my territory. He will face justice in the underworld. They began to argue. But Naruto held up a hand, silencing them both. He walked up to the pinned and powerless Kokobile, who was glaring at him with pure hatred. You're both wrong, Naruto said. He placed his hand on Kokobile's forehead. Killing him or imprisoning him just makes him a martyr. I need to know why he was so confident. I need to know who else is pulling the strings. A strange, olden energy flowed from Naruto's palm into Kokobile's mind. The fallen angel's eyes rolled back in his head as Naruto forcibly searched his memories. Flashes of images flooded Naruto's consciousness, Kokobile meeting with shadowy figures. His obsession with the Great War, his hatred for the current leaders of the factions. But then, a new memory surfaced, one Kokobile himself barely understood. He was in a dark place, a void. And a voice, a formless, empty whisper, was speaking to him, promising him the power to achieve his goals, fanning the flames of his warmongering nature. The whispers, Naruto thought. Recognizing the same insidious influence Kurama had warned him about during his summoning. Erebus. Naruto pulled his hand back, his expression grim. He had the information he needed. He then placed his hand on Kokobeel's chest. A complex seal, a variant of the one he'd used on Riser, spread across the fallen angel's body. But this one didn't just immobilize him, it began to drain him. Kokobeel screamed as his 10 wings dissolved into motes of light, his immense holy power being systematically and permanently siphoned from his body and dispersed harmlessly into the atmosphere. When Naruto was finished, Kokobeel slumped forward, alive but utterly broken. He was no stronger than a common human now. No longer a threat to anyone. There, Naruto said, turning to the stunned devils and exorcists. He's neutralized. No power, no wings, no threat. You can have what's left of him. He had created a third option, a solution that served justice without resorting to killing, all while achieving his own strategic objectives. Just as the dust was settling, the air crackled with a new power. A silver-white magic circle appeared, and from it stepped a young man in a Kuo Academy uniform. He had silver hair and a confident smirk, and on his back were 12 pristine white dragon wings. From his back, a voice echoed, ethereal and draconic. Vanishing Dragon, Albion. It was Valley Lucifer, the White Dragon Emperor. He looked at the defeated Kokobeel, at the cratered battlefield, and finally, his intrigued gaze settled on Naruto, whose golden cloak of power was just beginning to fade. Well, Valley said. His voice laced with amusement and excitement. I felt that power from halfway across the country. I was hoping to have a go with Kokobeel myself, but it seems someone beat me to it. He looked Naruto up and down, his eyes gleaming with a predator's interest. Uzumaki Naruto. The rumors about you are far more interesting than I thought. A power that is neither demonic nor holy. What a fascinating creature you are. He took a step forward, his own immense power rising to meet Naruto's. Let's see what you've got. You and me. The sage versus the dragon. The air grew thick with tension. A standoff between two beings of immense, world-class power. Before Naruto could respond, a crimson circle flared beside him, and Seersex Lucifer himself stepped through, Graphia at his side. That is enough. Valley, Seersex said, his voice calm but carrying an absolute authority that made even the White Dragon Emperor pause. This is not the time or place. Valley look. From Seersex to Naruto and back again, his smirk widening. Fine. I can wait. His eyes locked with Naruto's. But we will fight, Uzumaki Naruto. A battle between us is destined. I look forward to it. And with that, he vanished in his own magic circle, leaving behind a group of exhausted heroes, a broken villain, and a world of new, terrifying questions. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6, of Dragons and Nekomata. The aftermath of Kokobeel's assault was a strange, muted affair. The cratered schoolyard was repaired overnight by a team of devilish construction specialists, leaving no trace of the battle that had nearly torn a hole in the fabric of the world. To the students of Kuo Academy, it was as if nothing had happened. But for the members of the Occult Research Club, everything had changed. They were gathered in the clubroom, a meeting Rias had called. The air was thick with a new kind of gravity. Across from them sat not just Seersex Lucifer, but another figure who had arrived shortly after Valley's departure. He was a handsome man with black hair, golden bangs, and a roguish grin. He wore a casual, open trench coat and radiated an aura of relaxed, confident power. This was Azazel, the Governor-General of the Fallen Angels, come to collect his wayward subordinate. With him was an honor guard of grim-faced Fallen, who stood silently by the door. Even the heavenly host was represented. A golden magic circle shimmered in the center of the room, from which the calm, authoritative voice of the Archangel Michael addressed them. The leaders of the three great factions, or at least two of them in person, were convened in their humble clubroom. And the topic of discussion was Uzumaki Naruto. To say your intervention was decisive would be an understatement, Uzumaki Naruto. Michael's voice resonated from the glowing circle. You prevented a war that would have cost countless lives. Heaven is in your debt. Azazel leaned back in his chair, propping his feet up on the table with a distinct lack of formality. Debt's the right word. You really did a number on my guy. Stripped him of his power completely. That's a new one. I've got him in a cell back in Grigori, and he's blubbering like a child. Frankly, it's hilarious, but the technique itself is fascinating. His inquisitive, intelligent eyes were locked on Naruto. That golden energy, six-path sage mode, you called it. It's unlike anything in our databases. It's not holy, it's not demonic, it's not even Tuki. It's pure life itself. How do you do it? Naruto, sitting on the couch next to a quietly observing Koneko, just shrugged. It's complicated. Lots of practice. I'll bet, Azazel chuckled. He was a researcher at heart, and Naruto was the most exciting new discovery in centuries. And Kokobile was raving about empty whispers that promised him power. That's a new one on me, too. Sounds like there are bigger fish swimming in the dark than just my idiot warmongers. Indeed, Searsex said, his expression grim. The political fallout from Lord Glacia Labilus's accidental death is already causing instability in the council. This new threat, whatever it is, seems to be making its moves from the shadows. He turned his gaze to Naruto, his eyes holding a new level of respect. Your presence here, Naruto-san, has become more crucial than I ever could have imagined. You are not merely a guardian for my sister anymore. You are a cornerstone of this fragile peace. The message was clear. Naruto was no longer a secret weapon or a political fiancé. He was being acknowledged as a global power, a king in his own right. By the leaders of the supernatural world. The meeting concluded with formal agreements. Zenobia and Irina, their faith shaken by the revelation of the Holy Sword Project's ins and the fact that God had apparently died centuries ago, a tidbit Kokobile had let slip in his ranting, were left in Rias's care. Zenobia, ever the pragmatist, declared her intention to serve the Grimoire household. Having nowhere else to go. Irina, heartbroken and confused, decided to stay with her new friends while she figured out her place in the world. As the leaders departed and a semblance of normalcy returned, Naruto became aware of a new, persistent presence in his life. It was a faint prickle on the back of his neck, a subtle shift in the air that only his sage senses could detect. Valley Lucifer was watching him. It wasn't hostile. It was observant. During classes, he would sometimes feel a gaze from a distant rooftop and know it was him. Walking home, he would sense a flicker of silver-white energy keeping pace from a parallel street. It was a game. A test. Valley was sizing him up, learning his rhythms, his habits. It was the patient, focused observation of a predator studying its equal. Naruto never acknowledged it directly, but he was always aware, the silent challenge, a low thrum of energy in the background of his new life. The true confrontation, when it came, was not initiated by the White Dragon Emperor, but by a ghost from Kaneko's past. It happened late one afternoon. The club was quiet, the members working on homework or quietly conversing. Naruto was trying to explain the concept of chakra control to a struggling Issei when Koneko, who had been staring out the window, suddenly went rigid. Her face, usually a mask of stoicism, was now ashen. Her hands were trembling. Koneko. What is it? Rias asked, alarmed by her rook's sudden distress. She's here, Koneko whispered, her voice barely audible. Before anyone could ask who she was, a black magic circle, intricate and swirling with senjutsu-infused demonic power, materialized in the center of the room. From it stepped a young woman with a stunning figure, long black hair, and cat ears twitching atop her head. She wore a revealing kimono, and two black cat tails swished lazily behind her. Her playful, seductive smile was a stark contrast to the immense, dangerous power she radiated. Nyahalo, little sister, the woman purred. Her golden eyes landing on Koneko. It's been a long time. Did you miss me? Kuroka, Koneko breathed, taking an involuntary step back. The name sent a jolt through the room. Kuroka Tuju. Kaneko's older sister. A former member of the Sea-Tree Peerage, an SS-class stray devil, wanted for killing her own master. And, as Azazel had warned them, a key member of the Chaos Brigade's Valley team. Kuroka's playful gaze swept over the room, dismissing Issei with a giggle and Rias with a condescending smirk. Her eyes lingered on Naruto for a moment, a flicker of genuine curiosity in their depths. So, this is the Grimoire Peerage Sharon has shackled herself to. How disappointing. I thought you'd have better taste, little sis. I am not your sister, Koneko said, her voice shaking but laced with a surprising amount of venom. Not since you abandoned me. Abandoned you. Kuroka's smile tightened. I saved you. I killed our master before he could turn his twisted experiments on you. I ran so you wouldn't be branded a traitor alongside me. Everything I've done has been to protect you. She took a step forward, her hands outstretched. And I'm here to finish the job. Come with me, Sharon. The White Dragon Emperor has promised us a home, a place where we Nekomata can be free. No more masters, no more callers. Rias stepped in front of Koneko, her power of destruction beginning to swirl around her hands. She is not going anywhere with a terrorist, Kuroka. Koneko is a member of my family. Kuroka laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. Family. You mean your slave. Don't be naive, Grimoire princess. You see her as a valuable rook. I see her as my sister, who deserves better. The room was a powder keg. Akeno's lightning began to arc, Kiba's hand was on his sword. And Zenobia had already summoned Durandal. Koneko stood behind them all, frozen, her face a mask of turmoil. She was trapped between the sister she had once loved and the new family she had come to cherish. Through it all, Naruto had remained silent, watching, his gaze fixed not on the powerful intruder, but on Koneko. He saw her fear, her anger, her confusion. He saw a terrified child being forced to choose between two sides of a painful past. Just as Kuroka was about to release a blast of her powerful senjutsu, Naruto moved. He didn't charge, he didn't summon a weapon. He simply walked forward, calmly and deliberately. Until he was standing directly in front of Koneko, shielding her with his body. He wasn't facing Kuroka with aggression. He was simply there. A wall. That's enough, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Kuroka's eyes narrowed. And who are you? The Grimoire pet I've been hearing about. I'm the guy telling you to stop, Naruto said, his gaze unwavering. He looked past Kuroka's power. Past her reputation as a stray, and saw the same thing he'd seen in Akeno, a deep, painful wound. I get it. You want to protect your sister. You think you're saving her. He took a step forward. Closing the distance between them, a move so unexpected it made Kuroka pause. But you're not asking her what she wants. You're just telling her what you've decided is best for her. You're trying to drag her away. Just like your old master tried to control you. You're doing the same thing you hate. His words struck a nerve. Kuroka's playful facade faltered, a flicker of genuine pain crossing her features. Naruto didn't press the attack. He turned his head slightly, speaking to the girl behind him without looking at her. Koneko. This is your choice. Not mine. Not Rias's. And not hers. He gestured back at Kuroka. If you want to go with your sister, we won't stop you. We'll be sad to see you go, but we won't hold you prisoner. But if you want to stay here, with us, then you stay. No one is going to take you anywhere you don't want to be. I promise you that. He had done the one thing no one else had. He had given her the power. He had validated her right to choose, to have agency over her own life. Behind him, Kaneko's trembling stopped. She looked at Naruto's broad, reliable back, the back of the man who had taught her how to truly use her power, who had defended her honor without a second thought. Who now defended her very soul. A wave of warmth and courage washed over her, dispelling the fear. She took a small, hesitant step forward, then another, until she was standing beside him. No longer hiding behind him. She looked her sister in the eye. I'm staying, she said, her voice small but clear and strong. This is my home. They are my family. Kuroka stared, her expression crumbling from arrogant confidence to heartbroken disbelief. Sharon. Before the emotional standoff could resolve, the air in the room crackled, and Valley Lucifer appeared beside Kuroka. Well, that was a touching little scene, he said with his trademark smirk. But unfortunately, Kuroka's mission was to retrieve her sister. Since you're interfering, I suppose that makes you an obstacle. His 12 draconic wings unfurled, filling the room with an immense pressure. Divide. The sound echoed from his wings as he activated his sacred gear, siphoning a portion of everyone's power in the room. Weakening them instantly. However, Valley continued, his eyes locking onto Naruto's. A cramped clubroom is no place for a proper fight. He snapped his fingers. The world dissolved. They weren't in the clubroom anymore. They were in a vast, empty dimension of swirling gray clouds and a featureless white ground. It was a pocket dimension, a dueling field. Searsex. Azazel. Who? Rias stammered. Looking around in confusion. Azazel, Valley answered for her. He agreed this was inevitable. He wants to see what you can do as much as I do. So, he provided the arena. He gestured around them. No interruptions. No collateral damage. Just you and me, Sage. Let's see whose legend is stronger, the Dragon of Genesis, or the Fox of Prophecy. Naruto looked at Koneko and the others, who were now standing a safe distance away. He gave Koneko a reassuring nod. Then he turned to face Valley, a slow, determined grin spreading across his face. The game was over. The challenge had been accepted. All right, Dragon Boy, Naruto said, cracking his knuckles. You've been following me around for weeks. Let's see if you were worth the attention. He dropped into a low fighting stance as Valley did the same. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, they both exploded into motion. The clash was apocalyptic. Valley moved with impossible speed, his fists and feet glowing with white divine energy. Naruto met him head-on, his body reinforced with sage chakra, turning every block and parry into a bone-jarring impact. Their fists met in the center of the dimension, and a shockwave erupted, tearing the gray clouds asunder and cracking the ground beneath them. Divide. 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 Albion's voice roared as Valley landed a series of rapid blows. With each hit, Naruto could feel a portion of his chakra being drained. Halved over and over again. It was a debilitating, terrifying power. It's useless, Sage. Valley yelled over the storm of their battle. My divine dividing halve. The power of anything it touches and adds it to my own. The longer we fight, the weaker you become, and the stronger I get. Naruto was sent flying back, his chakra reserves noticeably diminished. He landed in a crouch, panting slightly. Valley was right. A direct brawl was a losing strategy. He's just like the old pain, Naruto thought, his mind racing. He absorbs power. So I can't use big, flashy jutsu. I have to give him something he can't absorb. He entered perfect sage mode, the orange pigmentation flaring around his eyes. He created two shadow clones. One began gathering natural energy, a stationary, vulnerable target. The other began forming a Rasengan. Valley laughed. More of that strange energy. And a chakra ball. Do you think I'll fall for the same trick twice? He charged, his fist aimed at the real Naruto. But Naruto didn't move. At the last second, he used a substitution jutsu, swapping places with the clone holding the Rasengan. Valley's fist plunged into the clone, which dispelled. But not before it slammed the Rasengan into Valley's side. The force of the blow sent the White Dragon Emperor tumbling, but he quickly recovered, the wound on his side already healing. A good trick, Valley admitted. But not good enough. I wasn't aiming to hurt you, Naruto said, pointing upwards. Valley looked up. While he had been focused on the clones, the real Naruto had launched himself into the air. He was descending now, a massive Rasenshuriken, infused with natural energy, shrieking in his hand. But he wasn't throwing it. He was aiming to slam it into Valley at point-blank range. Albion's voice roared in alarm. Valley, that attack. It attacks on a cellular level. Dividing it is risky. It could shred your wings. Valley's eyes widened. He had no choice. He poured all his power into his wings and fired a massive blast of white energy, a dragon shot meant to obliterate Naruto before he could connect. The Rasenshuriken met the dragon shot in a cataclysmic explosion of wind and light that tore the pocket dimension apart at the seams. Both fighters were thrown back, battered and bruised. Naruto's Six Paths mode was gone, drained by the massive jutsu and Valley's dividing ability. Valley's armor was cracked. His energy depleted from the counterattack. It was a stalemate. They hovered in the fractured dimension, breathing heavily, regarding each other with a new, profound level of respect. You are incredible, Valley said, a genuine, exhilarated grin on his face. No one has ever pushed me that far. You're not so bad yourself, Naruto admitted, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip. For a guy with a creepy voice in his back. The dimension began to collapse, depositing them all back in the Orc clubroom, which was miraculously untouched. Kuroko was standing beside Valley. Her earlier mission seemingly forgotten in the wake of the duel. Valley looked at Naruto one last time. This isn't over. But for now, we have what we came for. He gave Kuroko a look. Kuroko looked at Koneko. Her expression now soft and sad. Sharon, just be safe. And with that, she and Valley vanished in a flash of silver light. The room was silent. The crisis was over. Koneko stood frozen for a moment, processing everything that had happened. Her sister had come for her. Her family had defended her. And Naruto had trusted her. While the others began to recover, chattering with relief and adrenaline. Koneko walked over to Naruto, who had slumped onto the couch, utterly exhausted. He looked up as she approached, expecting a quiet, "thank you," or perhaps even a chocolate bar. He got neither. Wordlessly. She sat down beside him, curled her small body against his side, and laid her head on his shoulder. It was a simple, quiet gesture, but it was more intimate than any embrace, more profound than any confession. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since her sister had left her, she felt completely and utterly safe. Naruto looked down at the white-haired girl resting against him, a soft, tired smile on his face. He wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. The battle between the sage and the dragon had ended in a draw, but in the quiet aftermath, he had won something far more important. He had earned the complete trust of a broken soul. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Sound of Silence. In the weeks following the duel with Valley, a comfortable, almost domestic rhythm settled over the occult research club. The near-constant crises had forged them into something more than a peerage. They were a tightly knit, if eccentric, family. Zenobia had awkwardly, but earnestly integrated herself into the group, her literal-minded devotion shifting from a dead god to her new king, Rias. Kiba, freed from the shadow of the Excalibur, seemed lighter, his swordsman ship in sparring sessions becoming more fluid and less haunted. Issei, humbled by the sheer scale of power he had witnessed, had even started taking his training seriously, his perverted outbursts now punctuated by moments of genuine focus. And Koneko was different. The silent, stoic girl had begun to open up, a flower unfurling in slow motion. She still didn't speak much, but her presence had changed. She now willingly sat next to Naruto during their downtime, sometimes even dozing off with her head on his lap as he read, a gesture of absolute trust that spoke more than 1,000 words. He had become her anchor, her safe harbor, and in return, her quiet, steady affection was a balm to the part of his soul that still remembered being utterly alone. Today was another such peaceful afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the clubroom, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Rias was going over some paperwork from the student council, Akeno was brewing tea, and Naruto was attempting to teach Asia and Issei the tree-walking exercise, a fundamental chakra control drill. It's not about strength, Issei, Naruto explained patiently as Issei, for the 5th time, slid down the trunk of a magically summoned tree, leaving a long scrape mark. It's about focus. Feel the energy in your feet. Too little, and you fall. Too much, and you blast the bark off. It's easy for you to say. Issei grumbled from a heap on the floor. You've been doing this stuff your whole life. Asia, on the other hand, was having more success. She stood tentatively on the side of the trunk. Her hands pressed against it for balance, a look of intense concentration on her face. I think I'm getting it, Naruto-san. See. You're doing great, Asia, Naruto encouraged with a warm smile. It's all about finding that perfect balance. Suddenly, Naruto's smile faded. He stood up straight, his head tilting slightly as if listening to a distant sound. The warm, cheerful energy that had filled the school grounds just moments before was curdling. It was like milk souring in the sun, a subtle but deeply unpleasant shift. Kit, Kurama's voice rumbled in his mind, the fox's mental presence stirring from a doze. Something's wrong. The emotional timbre of this place is twisting. What is it, Naruto-kun? Akeno asked, pausing with the teapot in her hand, noticing the sudden change in his demeanor. I don't know, Naruto murmured, his sage senses instinctively reaching out. He couldn't detect a hostile power signature, no magic circle, no enemy in waiting. It was something far more insidious. He could feel the emotions of the hundreds of students in the main building, their joy, their boredom, their minor anxieties, and they were all beginning to warp. The threads of their emotional energy were fraying, turning bitter and sharp. Down on the school grounds, a second-year student accidentally bumped into a third-year, knocking a book from his hands. Hey, watch it, shrimp, the third-year snapped. His voice filled with a disproportionate amount of venom. It was an accident, jerk. The second year shot back. Normally, it would have ended with a mumbled apology. Today, it ended with a shouting match that drew a small, angry crowd. Naruto felt it like a wave of nausea. The entire school's atmosphere was becoming toxic. Paranoia was blooming in the hallways like black mold. Minor annoyances were escalating into bitter arguments. Laughter was being replaced by suspicious whispers. There's some kind of curse, Naruto said, his eyes narrowing. It's not an attack. It's a contamination. It's feeding on negativity. Rias was instantly on alert. Can you pinpoint the source? No, Naruto admitted, a grimace on his face. It's everywhere. It's like a fog, seeping into everything. The door to the clubroom suddenly slid open with a bang. Kiba stood there, his hand on the hilt of his sword, his expression dark and stormy. Rias, we have a problem. The Endo Club and the Karate Club are in an all-out brawl in the gym. They're using real weapons. What? Over what? Rias asked, shocked. A dispute over gym scheduling, Kiba said, his voice clipped. But it feels wrong. They're fighting like they want to kill each other. As he spoke, the curse began to seep into their own sanctuary. The first to fall was Issei. He finally managed to get a foothold on the tree. Scrambling a few feet up before sliding back down. He looked over at Naruto, who was now in a serious discussion with Rias. He saw the way Rias listened to Naruto's every word, the way Akeno watched him with an intense proprietary gaze, the way Koneko had moved to stand silently by his side. And the curse found its purchase. It took his ambition, his desire to be a harem king, and twisted it into a thick, poisonous jealousy. Why him? Why did this outsider just show up and get everything? The power, the respect, the girls, it wasn't fair. Of course, he's the one giving all the orders. Issei muttered under his breath, just loud enough to be heard. Walks in here and suddenly he's the big shot, telling everyone what to do. Issei. Rias snapped, her head turning to him. This is not the time. Oh, of course. Issei said, getting to his feet, a sneer on his face. Gotta listen to the golden boy. God forbid anyone questions him. I bet you all love it, don't you? Fawning over the new hero. Kinda makes the rest of us feel like spare parts. The words were so out of character, so filled with a bitter resentment they had never heard from him, that it stunned them all into silence. The poison spread. Kiba, already on edge from the brawl, felt a cold dread seeping into his heart. He looked at his friends, Rias, a pure-blooded devil, Akeno, a fallen devil hybrid, Koneko, a Nekomata. Powerful, non-human beings. The curse dredged up the buried trauma of the Holy Sword Project, the memory of being surrounded by detached, uncaring researchers who saw him as nothing but a tool for their own ambitions. His new family suddenly seemed alien to him, their demonic power a reminder of the cold, cruel world of the supernatural that had chewed him up and spat him out. He felt a profound sense of isolation. The lone human survivor once again surrounded by monsters. He withdrew into himself, his hand never leaving his sword, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting betrayal at any moment. Asia was next. She saw the rising anger and fear, and her own deep-seated insecurity flared into a burning self-loathing. She was a former nun, a heretic, a devil. This darkness, this conflict, she was the cause. Her unclean presence was corrupting this peaceful place, tainting her precious friends. The curse whispered in her ear that her healing was a pathetic mockery of God's grace, that she was useless. A burden. She shrank into a corner, tears welling in her eyes, her very presence feeling like a sin. Even Akeno and Rias weren't immune. Akeno's newfound balance shattered. The voice of her father. The blood of the fallen, screamed in her mind. Naruto's words of acceptance were drowned out by a wave of self-hatred. Her teasing smile returned, but it was sharp, cruel. A weapon to keep others at a distance. Rias felt the immense pressure of leadership twisting into paralyzing doubt. Her friends were turning on each other, a hostile force was enveloping her territory, and she didn't know what to do. Every potential command felt wrong, every choice a path to disaster. The Occult Research Club, the family forged in fire, was tearing itself apart at the seams. NLY2 people remained relatively clear. Naruto, whose sage mode allowed him to feel the unnatural, parasitic nature of the emotions, could distinguish the curse from reality. And Koneko. Her trauma was deep, but her emotional world was small and intensely focused. Her trust in Naruto had become the bedrock of her psyche. While the others were lost in a sea of complex insecurities, Koneko's world had simplified to a single, unshakable truth: stay close to Naruto. She stood by his side, Her small fists clenched, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance, a tiny island of stability in a storm of emotional chaos. Listen to me. Naruto's voice boomed, imbued with a touch of chakra that cut through the haze of negativity. This isn't you. It's the curse. It's making you feel this way. It's feeding on your doubts. On your fears. You have to fight it. Fight it. Or just shut up and listen to you. Issei sneered, his face twisted with jealousy. You think you're so much better than us. You're a devil, Kiba. Akeno said to the silent knight, her voice a cruel purr. Did you really think you'd ever be one of us? You're just a useful tool, a pretty little sword we point at our enemies. Kiba flinched as if he'd been struck. Asia let out a heartbroken sob. Rias was pale, her hands trembling, unable to find the words to restore order. Naruto knew he was losing them. He couldn't fix their minds with a speech. Not while the curse was actively poisoning them. He had to sever the source. Rias, he said, his voice sharp, forcing her to look at him. I need you. Your family has owned this land for generations. There must be old maps, blueprints of the school. I'm looking for a place with a high concentration of spiritual or emotional energy. A place that could act as an amplifier. An old shrine, a memorial. A focal point. His direct command, his reliance on her knowledge, seemed to cut through some of Rias's doubt. It gave her a task, a purpose. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to focus. The school, it was built on a confluence of ley lines. There are several focal points. The shrine on the hill, the old well in the forest, and, her eyes snapped open. The observatory. It's been sealed off for decades. It sits at the highest point of the main building, directly over the largest ley line convergence. That's it, Naruto said, his senses agreeing. A high point, a focal point. The perfect place for a broadcast antenna for this curse. That's our target. He turned to the others. We're going to the roof. And leave the school to tear itself apart. Rias asked. Her leadership instincts warring with her trust in him. My clones are already handling it, he said grimly. They're containing the violence, not with force, but with transformation jutsu. Creating walls. Illusions, they're buying us time. But they can't stop the curse itself. We have to cut off the head. The journey to the roof was a psychological hell. Naruto had to physically pull and cajole his fractured team. Issei dragged his feet, muttering insults. Kiba moved like a paranoid automaton, his eyes scanning every shadow for enemies. Asia wept silently, apologizing for her own existence with every step. Akeno made biting, cruel remarks, trying to drive them all away. Naruto had to be their anchor. He ignored Issei's insults, placed a firm, grounding hand on Kiba's shoulder, offered quiet words of reassurance to Asia. And met Akeno's verbal barbs with an unshakable calm. He was a shepherd guiding a flock of wounded, panicking sheep through a storm, with Koneko as his loyal sheepdog at his side. They finally reached the sealed door to the rooftop observatory. It was bound with heavy chains and a notice declaring it structurally unsafe. Koneko, channeling her frustration and fear, punched the door clean off its hinges. The room inside was dark and filled with the dust of ages. A large, archaic telescope stood in the center under a retractable dome, pointing at the sky. But the air was cold. And it hummed with a malevolent, psychic energy. And sitting in a chair beside the telescope, as if he had been waiting for them, was a man in a simple gray suit. He had thinning hair, a tired face. And wore the benign name tag of the school's new guidance counselor, Mr. Moros. Ah, Grimori-san's little club, he said, his voice soft and gentle, a horrifying contrast to the oceanal poison he was pumping into the school. I was wondering when the anomaly would track me down. His placid eyes settled on Naruto. In the center of the room, on a small pedestal, was a crystal. It was the color of a starless midnight sky, and it pulsed with a sickening, silent rhythm, the source of the curse. Who are you? Rias demanded, trying to summon her power, but finding it difficult to focus through the haze of self-doubt. I am merely a shepherd, my dear, Mr. Moros said, his voice soothing. I guide lost souls to a place of peace. A place of quiet. He stood up, and the gentle counselor persona fell away, revealing an ancient, weary emptiness in his eyes. He was a silencer. You see, life is a disease. Every emotion you feel is a symptom. Ambition leads to jealousy and failure. Love leads to grief and loss. Hope leads to despair. It is all just noise. A pointless, painful cacophony. He gestured to the suffering members of the ORC. I offer a cure. The sublime peace of nothingness. The great silence that awaits at the end of all things. My master, the great primordial Erebus, wishes only to grant this mercy to a cosmos that is screaming in agony. You call this mercy? Naruto shot back. Stepping forward, Koneko right beside him. You're a parasite, feeding on pain and calling it peace. The silencer smiled, a tired, pitying expression. You cling so fiercely to your pain, sage. You, of all people, who has known so much loss, so much loneliness. Don't you crave the quiet? The end of the struggle. He raised a hand, and the crystal pulsed violently. A final, overwhelming wave of despair washed over the room, aimed directly at Naruto. The curse delved into his mind, seeking his deepest wounds. It showed him the scorn of the villagers, the death of Jiraiya, the final battle with Sasuke. The crushing loneliness of a hero in a world at peace. It whispered to him that his new friends would betray him, that his purpose here was a lie, that all his struggles were for nothing. But it found Kurama. A titanic, snarling wall of pure, unadulterated rage and willpower. Get out of our head. The fox roared, and the psychic intrusion was blasted back. Naruto staggered for a moment. But his eyes were clear. He looked at the silencer, not with anger, but with a profound pity. You're wrong, he said, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. Yeah, life is full of pain. It's full of loss and failure and goodbyes. But that's what makes the good parts matter. The laughter, the victories, the ramen with your friends, the quiet moments, they mean something because of the struggle. You don't want to grant peace. You just want to erase the board because you're afraid of losing the game. His words, a pure, undiluted affirmation of life, acted like a thunderclap in the room. Rias's eyes cleared for a moment. Akeno flinched. Asia looked up. His will was a direct counter-agent to the silencer's philosophy of despair. The silencer's calm expression finally broke. Replaced by a flicker of annoyance. A stubborn child, to the last. He made no move to fight. No matter. The seed is planted. The master's arrival is inevitable. This was merely a test of your resistance. He dissolved into shadows, a whisper of a laugh echoing in the silent room. Enjoy the noise while it lasts. He was gone. Naruto didn't hesitate. He formed a Rasengan and slammed it into the dark crystal. The artifact screamed, a high-pitched psychic shriek that vibrated in their very bones, and then shattered into a million pieces of dust. As it did, the oppressive psychic fog over the school vanished instantly. In the hallways, students shook their heads, looking around in confusion, a vague sense of shame and a pounding headache the only remnants of their temporary madness. In the observatory, the effect was just as immediate. Issei blinked, the jealous rage draining from him, replaced by a horrified memory of the things he'd said. Kiba stumbled, the paranoia receding, leaving him shaking. Asia's tears of self-hatred turned to tears of relief. The cruel mask fell from Akeno's face, and Rias could finally breathe again. They looked at each other, the raw, ugly wounds of their insecurities now laid bare in the quiet room. The silence that followed was not the empty peace of the silencer, but a heavy, awkward quiet filled with shame and regret. The family had been broken. And now, they had to figure out how to put the pieces back together. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. A Summit of Kings, a War of Pawns. The observatory on the roof of Kuo Academy was silent, save for the quiet, ragged breathing of its occupants. The dark crystal, the source of the psychic poison, had been reduced to harmless dust, but the emotional shrapnel remained, embedded in the hearts of the occult research club. They were a tableau of shame and regret, the ugly words they had flung at each other still hanging in the air like bitter smoke. Issei wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, his face a mask of misery. Kiba stood stiffly, the memory of his own paranoia making his posture rigid. Akeno's smile was gone, leaving her looking tired and vulnerable, while Asia wept silently, huddled in a corner. Rias, the king, looked over her fractured peerage, her expression lost and heartbroken. Naruto knew this moment was more critical than any battle. A physical wound could be healed, but a broken bond, if left to fester, would poison them from within. He couldn't let that happen. He walked over to Issei and clapped a firm hand on his shoulder. Issei flinched, expecting a reprimand. It wasn't you, Issei, Naruto said. His voice calm and devoid of judgment. That thing, that silencer. His technique was like a high-level genjutsu. It doesn't create emotions. It finds the cracks that are already there, your ambition, your desire to prove yourself, and pours poison into them until they split wide open. What you said wasn't you. It was the curse wearing your face. Issei looked up, his eyes wide and red-rimmed. But I felt it. That jealousy, it was real. Of course it was, Naruto said, nodding. You're a competitive guy. You want to be the strongest. There's nothing wrong with that. The curse just twisted it into something ugly. Don't let it win by blaming yourself for what a weapon made you do. He moved to Kiba next, who stood like a statue. Kiba, you've been alone, surrounded by monsters, before. That fear is a part of your story. The curse used it, made you see your new family through the eyes of your past trauma. But look around. Do you see researchers? Or do you see friends who fought beside you? Kiba's rigid posture softened fractionally. He glanced at Rias, at Koneko, his expression filled with a dawning, painful clarity. Naruto then knelt beside Asia, offering her a handkerchief. You are not a burden, Asia. Your kindness and your light are the brightest things in this club. That's why the curse targeted you so viciously. Darkness always tries to snuff out the brightest light first. Your pain is proof of your strength, not your weakness. Asia took the handkerchief, her sobs quieting into hiccups as his words washed over her. Finally, he stood before Akeno, who was staring at her own hands as if they were venomous. Akeno, he said softly. Her head snapped up, her violet eyes filled with a fresh wave of self-loathing. Don't, she whispered. Things I said to Kiba, it was so cruel. That's sadism, it's part of me. The curse just let it off the leash. Maybe, Naruto conceded, his honesty disarming her. Maybe it is. But the Akeno I know so stood in the sky and called down lightning to protect everyone. The Akeno I know shared her pain with me at the shrine. You are not one thing, Akeno. You are not just a sadist, or a fallen's daughter, or a devil. You are all of it. And you get to choose which part is in control. The curse took that choice away. Now, you have it back. His gaze swept over all of them. That thing wanted to break us. It wanted to prove that all our bonds are just a prelude to pain. Are you going to let it be right? Are you going to let a cheap magic trick, a whisper in the dark, be the end of this family? The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then, Issei wiped his eyes and stood up, walking over to Kiba. Man, Kiba, I'm sorry. The stuff I said, I was a total ass. Kiba managed a small, tired smile. It wasn't you, Issei. Naruto is right. One by one, the apologies came. Awkward, heartfelt, and necessary. The wounds weren't gone, but they were being cleaned, tended to. The family, though cracked, was refusing to shatter. As Rias watched Naruto bring her people back from the brink, her heart swelled with an emotion that was deeper than gratitude, more profound than admiration. It was a fierce, protective love for the man who was not just their guardian, but their anchor. Their quiet, fragile reconciliation was interrupted by the flare of a Grimoire transport circle. Graphia Lucifuge stepped out, her expression as stoic as ever. But her eyes held a flicker of concern as she took in the emotionally ravaged state of the group. Lady Rias, she said with a formal bow. Lord Searsex requests your presence. And yours as well. Uzumaki Naruto. An emergency summit has been called. The student council room at Kuo Academy had been transformed. The mundane furniture was gone, replaced by a large, circular table of polished obsidian. The very air in the room was different, heavy with the layered power of ages. Seated at the table were the three most powerful figures in the known world. Sirs. Lucifer sat with his usual regal calm, but a tension lined his eyes. Beside him, Azazel, the Governor-General of the Fallen Angels, lounged in his chair, a flask in one hand, but his sharp, analytical gaze missed nothing. And projected in a column of golden light on the third side of the table was the serene, impossibly beautiful face of the Archangel Michael, his voice echoing from the pillar. Rias and her peerage stood along the wall, observers in a game of gods. Naruto, however, had been given a seat at the great table, a position of honor and equality that was not lost on anyone present. He was no longer a guest. He was a recognized power. The psychological attack on this school was not an isolated incident, Searsex began, his voice grave. Similar, smaller-scale events have been reported in territories belonging to both the angels and the fallen. Hysteria, paranoia, minor skirmishes flaring from nothing. The pattern is undeniable. The Chaos Brigade is a bunch of thugs and terrorists, Azazel added, taking a swig from his flask. This isn't their style. They like big explosions and dramatic speeches. This is quiet, insidious. It's the work of a different artist. He looked at Naruto. You got a name for this new group? The Silencers. Naruto nodded. That's what the one I met called himself. He served a master named Erebus. He called him a primordial. The name dropped into the room. And for the first time, Michael's serene projection wavered. Erebus, the archangel repeated, his voice laced with an ancient concern. The name is known to us only in the most forbidden of celestial texts. He is of the first creation. A being of the void that came before light. We believed his kind faded into nothingness when my father created the system. Seems you believed wrong, Azazel grunted. A primordial god of nothingness sending psychic assassins to stir up trouble. Fantastic. Just what we needed. This entity's philosophy, as explained by his agent, Naruto continued, is that life is suffering. And his goal is to grant the mercy of oblivion to the cosmos. A chilling silence fell over the table. The Chaos Brigade wanted to rule the world. Erebus wanted to erase it. They were facing a threat not to their power structures, but to their very existence. We must present a united front, Searsex declared. Our old rivalries are a luxury we can no longer afford. We must pool our intelligence, our resources. He was cut off by a sound that should have been impossible. A tearing, screeching noise as the very space in the center of the room began to warp. A vortex of chaotic energy erupted, and from it stepped figures wreathed in malevolent power. At their head was a woman with long, black hair wearing revealing battle armor, a cruel smirk on her face. Kateria Leviathan. The descendant of the original Satan Leviathan and a high-ranking commander of the Chaos Brigade. A united front. She sneered. How touching. You three have grown so soft, playing at peace. We've come to remind you of the proper order of things. Behind her, dozens of rogue devils and fallen angels materialized, their weapons drawn. But they weren't the main threat. Two other figures stood with Kateria. One was a beautiful young man with the features of a Nekomata, Kuroka's associate, Baiko. The other made Naruto's blood run cold. It was Valley Lucifer. But he was wrong. His usual confident smirk was gone. Replaced by a blank, empty stare. His silver-white armor was already forming around him, but it pulsed with a sickly, dark energy. A faint, almost invisible reed of shadow seemed to be connected to the back of his neck, a psychic puppet string. Valley. Azazel shouted, leaping to his feet. What is the meaning of this? Valley didn't respond. He simply raised a hand. And a sphere of demonic energy, tinged with the white of Albion's power, formed in his palm. Kateria laughed. The White Dragon Emperor had a moment of weakness, a flicker of doubt after his little draw with your pet hero. The agents of the Silence were more than happy to exploit it. He is ours to command now. A perfect, mindless weapon. The attack was instantaneous. The faction leaders, kings in their own right, exploded into action. Searsex, crimson power of destruction met Kateria's tidal wave of demonic water. Azazel, wielding a spear of pure golden light, engaged Baiko and a dozen other mages. Michael's projection flared, and lances of holy light rained down, providing support. The summit room became a storm of cataclysmic power. The Grimoire peerage, hopelessly outclassed, could only erect a defensive barrier, protecting themselves from the shockwaves of a battle between gods. In the midst of the chaos, Valley moved. He ignored the faction leaders. His empty eyes were locked on a single target, Naruto. He shot forward, a silver-white blur of pure, destructive intent. Naruto met him head-on. The impact of their collision sent a shockwave that cracked the obsidian table in half. But this was not like their last fight. Valley wasn't toying with him, wasn't testing him. His movements were brutally efficient, devoid of his usual flair. It was like fighting a machine. Designed for the sole purpose of killing him. Divide. Valley's fist connected with Naruto's guard, and the draining effect was immediate and vicious. Naruto was thrown back, his chakra reserves plummeting. Valley, snap out of it. Naruto yelled, dodging a blast of white draconic energy that vaporized the wall behind him. This isn't you. There was no response, only another relentless assault. Naru. To knew he couldn't win a battle of attrition, not against a puppet who felt no pain or exhaustion and whose every touch weakened him. He couldn't kill Valley, and he couldn't beat him in a straight fight. The shinobi in him screamed the answer. If you can't defeat the puppet, you have to cut the strings. I have to get inside his head, Naruto thought, his mind racing. Like with Obito. Like with the tailed beasts. It was a massive risk. To enter another's mindscape required immense concentration, leaving his own body vulnerable. But it was the only way. Everyone, I need an opening. Naruto roared over the din of battle. Just 5 seconds. Rias understood instantly. Now. Everyone, on Valley. Akeno unleashed a torrent of holy lightning. Kiba and Xenovia launched a combined sword birth assault. Issei, with a desperate cry of boost, fired a small dragon shot. It was a pathetic barrage against the White Dragon Emperor, but it wasn't meant to harm him. It was a distraction. Valley, with mechanical precision, erected a barrier of light to block the incoming attacks. For a single, critical moment, his forward momentum was halted. It was all Naruto needed. He entered six-path sage mode, the golden cloak flaring to life. And charged through the barrage of his friend's attacks, his hand outstretched, glowing with a gentle, pale blue psychic energy. He slammed his palm against Valley's helmet. Mind-body transmission jutsu. Quote. The world vanished. He was no longer in the summit room. He was in a vast, stormy void, under a roiling sky of black clouds lit by flashes of white lightning. In the center of the storm was Valley. Not in his armor, but in his school uniform, suspended in midair by thick, shadowy chains that wrapped around his limbs and his neck. His eyes were closed, his expression slack. A voice, draconic and weary, echoed through the mindscape. So, the sage has entered my host's soul. It has been a long time since I have had a visitor. Naruto looked around and saw it. A colossal, Western-style dragon. Its scales a shimmering white, was bound by the same shadowy chains, pinned to the very fabric of the mindscape. It was Albion, the vanishing dragon. Albion, Naruto said, his voice respectful. What happened? The whispers. The silencers, Albion rumbled. After your duel, my host felt a flicker of doubt. A fear that he might have a true rival he could not surpass. It was all the opening they needed. Their curse is a parasite of the soul. It has shackled his will and turned him into their marionette. Naruto looked at the shadowy chains. They pulsed with the same empty, despairing energy as the curse at the school. Floating behind the chained Valley was a formless, hooded figure made of pure shadow, its ethereal hands resting on Valley's shoulders. The puppet master. Can you break them? Naruto asked the great dragon. I have tried, Albion admitted. My power can divide anything physical, any energy. But this is a conceptual prison, built from my host's own pride and fear. I cannot divide a shadow. But your energy is different. It is the antithesis of this void. It is life. Naruto understood. He floated towards the unconscious Valley, but the shadowy puppeteer reacted. Tightening its grip. The chains pulsed, and the mental storm raged harder. It's no use, Naruto said, his voice projecting through the storm, aimed at the man within the prison. Fighting the chains won't work. Valley. Listen to me. You have to wake up. There was no response. Is this really you, Valley Lucifer? Naruto challenged, his voice sharp with scorn. The proud White Dragon Emperor. The ultimate rival. Letting some shadow play with you like a doll. I thought you wanted to fight the strongest. Is this how the strongest acts? As a mindless puppet. A flicker. Valley's brow furrowed in his sleep. I came here expecting a rival, Naruto pressed on, his voice rising. Someone to push me to my limits. And this is what I get. A coward hiding in his own while someone else does the fighting for him. You're not my rival. You're a disappointment. He is right, partner, Albion roared, his own power surging, straining against his bonds. Your pride is your greatest strength. Do not let this lesser being usurp it. You are the host of the vanishing dragon. You bow to no one. Awaken. The combined mental assault was too much for the curse. Valley's eyes snapped open. They were no longer empty. They were blazing with a furious, silver-white light. He looked at the chains, at the shadowy figure controlling him, and he let out a roar of pure, unadulterated rage. Get out of my head. A cataclysmic explosion of white light erupted from him. It was not Albion's power of division, it was Valley's own indomitable will. The shadow puppeteer shrieked as it was vaporized. The chains shattered into dust. The storm in his mindscape broke, revealing a clear, calm sky. Naruto felt a psychic shove, and he was back in his own body. He stumbled back as Valley staggered, clutching his head. His armor retracting. He was in my soul, Valley gasped, his voice filled with a cold fury Naruto had never heard before. Kateria Leviathan, who had just blasted Searzek's back, saw her ultimate weapon was free. No. Impossible. Valley slowly turned his head, his eyes, now burning with a vengeful fire, locking onto her. You allied with them, he growled, his voice dangerously low. You let them defile my soul. You will pay for that. Before anyone could react, he was gone, a blur of white light. He appeared before Kateria, his hand glowing with Albion's power. He didn't say another word. He just drove his hand into her stomach. Divide. 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 The sound echoed like a death knell as Kateria's immense demonic power was siphoned from her in a devastating, unstoppable torrent. She didn't even have time to scream before she collapsed, her body drained and broken. The remaining Chaos Brigade members stared in horror. Their trump card had just turned on them. Baiko, the smart one, made a quick decision. Retreat. Now. They scrambled to open a portal, but before they could escape, an event of such profound, cosmic wrongness occur. That it made the entire battle seem like a children's squabble. A hole opened in the center of the room. It was not a magic circle or a dimensional gate. It was a perfect sphere of absolute nothingness. A patch of reality that had simply been erased. It did not emit darkness, it absorbed light. It did not make a sound, it consumed it. From this hole in the world stepped a figure. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in a simple, archaic black tunic. His face was unnervingly calm, his eyes the color of faded starlight, holding an emptiness that seemed to predate existence itself. The air around him grew cold. And the very laws of physics seemed to fray at his presence. He looked at the scene of chaos, his expression one of mild disappointment. Then, he raised a single, slender finger. And the world stopped. Searzek's, mid-lunge, was frozen. Michael's lances of light hung in the air. Azazel, poised to strike, was a statue. Valley, radiating furious power, was locked in place. Every mote of dust, every flicker of energy, was frozen in a perfect, silent tableau. But Naruto was not. He stood, his golden six paths cloak flickering around him, the only thing in creation that was still moving. The natural energy that flowed through him, the life force of a world, seemed to be the one thing that could resist this absolute stasis. The gaunt figure turned his ancient, empty eyes to Naruto, a flicker of genuine surprise in them. An anomaly, the being said, his voice not a sound, but a concept imprinted directly on Naruto's mind. A flicker of life in the great, silent dark. How irritating. This was not a silencer. This was something more. This was one of Erebus's true chosen. The pieces were set, the being continued, his gaze sweeping over the frozen gods and devils with utter contempt. But you keep knocking over the board. It does not matter. The first ritual is complete. The unmaking has already begun. He looked back at Naruto, a hint of something that might have been a threat in his empty eyes. Enjoy the noise while it lasts, little spark. The great silence is coming for you all. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and then stepped back into the sphere of nothingness. The hole in reality sealed itself, leaving no trace it had ever been there. And time resumed. The sounds of battle crashed back in, but everyone had stopped fighting. The remaining Chaos Brigade members, forgotten in the face of this new horror, fled through their portal. The leaders of the three factions stood panting, looking around, a deep, primal fear in their eyes. They had felt it, the sensation of being utterly, contemptuously frozen, of being rendered insignificant by a power they couldn't even begin to comprehend. What was that? Azazel whispered, his usual bravado gone, replaced by a raw, naked dread. Searzek looked at Naruto, the only one who had seen what truly happened. Naruto's expression was grim, the weight of a new, terrible knowledge in his eyes. That, Naruto said, his voice low and serious, was the real enemy. The summit was over. The Chaos Brigade had been repelled. But they had not won. They had merely been shown a glimpse of the true war to come, a war not for thrones or territory, but for the right of existence itself. And they were hopelessly, terrifyingly outmatched. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9, Oaths of the Heart. The world held its breath. In the days following the disastrous summit, a palpable tension settled over the supernatural world like a funeral shroud. The name Erebus was a poisoned whisper passing between the highest echelons of the three factions. Intelligence networks were in a frenzy, ancient archives were being scoured, and every faction leader was preparing for a war against an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't comprehend, and whose power made their own seem like a child's tantrum. The Chaos Brigade, once the primary threat, was now little more than a footnote, their internal power struggles and lust for conk. Saint rendered petty and insignificant in the face of a being who wanted to unmake the board itself. This oppressive weight was felt most keenly in the small, wooden building that housed the Occult Research Club. The easy camaraderie and peaceful rhythm they had fought so hard to build had been replaced by a quiet, grim sobriety. They trained with a new, desperate intensity. They spoke in hushed tones. They had seen the face of their true enemy, had felt the terrifying chill of his power, and the knowledge of their own powerlessness was a constant, cold presence in the room. Victory no longer felt like a possibility. Survival had become the only goal. The one who felt this cosmic dread most acutely was Asia Argento. Her faith had been the bedrock of her existence, and though it had been shaken and remolded, her gentle soul still sought a higher power, a sense of order in the universe. The philosophy of Erebus, that existence was a flaw and life a disease to be cured by oblivion, was a blasphemy so profound it shook her to her very core. It was an assault on the very concept of hope. She found Naruto late one evening, sitting on the edge of the school swimming pool, long after everyone else had gone home. He wasn't training or meditating. He was just staring at the way the moonlight rippled on the still, chlorinated water, his expression distant and thoughtful. The golden power of the sage was dormant. And in the pale light, he looked impossibly human, carrying a weight that would have crushed any ordinary man. Naruto-san, she said, her voice a soft, timid thing in the quiet night. He turned. And his somber expression immediately softened when he saw her. Asia. You should be resting. I couldn't sleep, she admitted, walking over to sit beside him, her feet dangling just above the water's surface. My head, it's so full of noise. Of fear. She hugged her knees to her chest. That thing at the summit. The one who froze everyone. I can't stop thinking about him. The way he looked at us, it was like we were nothing. Not even insects. Just a mistake that needed to be erased. Her voice trembled. Everything I used to believe in told me that life is a sacred gift. That even in the darkness, there is a divine light. But he was the opposite of that. He was a holy void. How can we fight something like that? How can we fight something that believes hope itself is the enemy? Naruto listened, his gaze fixed on her troubled face. He didn't offer her a platitude. He didn't tell her not to be afraid. He respected her fear by acknowledging its legitimacy. We don't, he said quietly. Asia looked up at him, her green eyes wide with confusion and a flicker of despair. We don't fight his philosophy, Naruto clarified, his voice gentle but firm. We don't get into a debate with the hurricane about whether or not it should be raining. We don't try to convince the void that it's wrong. Arguing with him is playing his game. He wants us to doubt, to despair, to question whether it's all worth it. He reached out and, with a surprising gentleness, took her hand. His was warm and calloused, a stark contrast to her own small, delicate one. It was an anchor in the storm of her fear. We fight for what's right here, he said, giving her hand a light squeeze. We fight for the person next to us. For the quiet moments in the clubroom. For Issei's stupid jokes and Kiba's terrible cooking. We fight for the way Akeno's tea always tastes perfect and the way Koneko looks when she's sleeping. He turned his gaze fully on her, and his blue eyes were as clear and deep as the sky. We fight for the light you bring into all of our lives, Asia. Your kindness, your faith in us, that's not a weakness. It's our best weapon. It's the one thing his empty philosophy can never understand and can never, ever erase. Tears began to stream down her face, but they weren't tears of fear anymore. They were tears of overwhelming, cathartic relief. He hadn't dismissed her terror. He had given her a shield against it. He hadn't promised her victory, but he had given her a reason to stand and fight. Naruto-san, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. From the moment you came here, you've protected me. You stood up for me when I was just a stranger. You told me my healing was a gift, not a sin. You make me feel brave. She tightened her grip on his hand, her knuckles white. This isn't just gratitude. I love you, Naruto-san. I love you with all of my heart. The confession hung in the moonlit air, pure and honest and terribly vulnerable. Naruto's expression was one of profound seriousness. He didn't look surprised or flustered. He accepted her words with the gravity they deserved. He used his free hand to gently wipe a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I know, Asia, he said softly. And I'm honored. He didn't say, I love you, back, not in the same way. He wouldn't offer her a cheap, easy answer. Instead, he gave her a promise, an oath sealed in the quiet of the night. I will always protect you. And I will always protect the hope you carry. No matter what comes. For Asia, it was more than enough. It was everything. The next afternoon found Naruto in the training field beneath the clubroom. He was alone, moving through a series of complex taijutsu katas, his body a blur of controlled, fluid motion. He was trying to find his center, to quiet his own mind. The threat of Erebus was a strategic nightmare, an enemy that operated on a conceptual level he was still struggling to grasp. Fighting it would require more than just power. It would require a new way of thinking. He was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't hear her approach. He only knew she was there when he finished a complex spinning kick and found her standing a few feet away. Watching him with her usual unblinking, hazel eyes. Koneko. Hey, he said, relaxing his stance, his breathing barely disturbed. Need something? She shook her head. She held up a chocolate bar in one hand. A silent offering. He smiled and took it, unwrapping it as he walked over to the bench and sat down. He expected her to remain standing or to take a seat at the far end, as was her old habit. Instead, she walked over and sat down right beside him, so close their shoulders were almost touching. The silence between them was comfortable, familiar. It was their own unique language. He ate the chocolate. And she simply sat there, a tiny, immovable guardian. You're worried, she stated, not as a question, but as a fact. Her voice was as soft and direct as ever. A little, he admitted, taking another bite. This new enemy is tricky. Not the kind of problem I can solve with a Rasengan. You'll find a way, she said with a simple, unshakable certainty that was more Ray's stirring than any grand speech of encouragement. You always do. He looked at her, at this small girl who had faced down so much trauma and yet possessed a core of strength as solid as bedrock. The quiet trust she placed in him was a heavy, precious weight. He finished the chocolate and was about to stand up and resume his training when she moved. Wordlessly, she leaned against him, tucking her small frame against his side. Then, as she had done once before in a moment of great emotional upheaval, she laid her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. It was a gesture of profound vulnerability and absolute trust. She wasn't seeking comfort from a passing fear, she was making a conscious choice. In a world that was growing darker and more terrifying by the day, she was choosing her sanctuary. She was choosing him. He was her home base, her true north. In her silent, stoic world, this simple act was a declaration louder than any shout, a confession more binding than any words. It was an oath of loyalty, of affection, of belonging. Naruto looked down at the top of her white hair, a soft, tired smile touching his lips. He felt the tension in his own shoulders ease, the strategic nightmare in his mind quieting for a moment. He gently wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He understood her language perfectly. He accepted her silent oath and, in return, offered his silent promise of protection. They sat there for a long time, a lone hero and his tiny, fierce guardian, two quiet souls finding strength in each other as the world prepared for war. That evening, the air grew cool, and a sliver of a moon hung in the alien sky of the underworld. The club had been transported to the Grimoire estate for a strategy meeting with Searsex that had ultimately devolved into a grim recitation of dead ends and unanswered questions. Erebus's agents were like ghosts, leaving no trace, and the unmaking, as the creature from the summit had called it, was manifesting as subtle, untraceable bad luck on a global scale. Freak accidents, sudden infrastructure failures, inexplicable electronic glitches. It was a war of 1,000 paper cuts against a world that didn't even know it was bleeding. Naruto found Akeno on a balcony overlooking the vast, nocturnal gardens of the Grimoire estate. She was leaning against the balustrade, a cup of tea in her hands. Her long black hair unbound and flowing in the gentle breeze. She looked serene, but he could sense the restless storm of energy just beneath the surface. Couldn't take any more of the doom and gloom. He asked, walking up to stand beside her. She offered him a small, wry smile. Sears-sama is a wonderful man, but his grim-faced determination can be a bit much. I needed some air. She took a sip of her tea. Besides, I wanted to talk to you. Her usual teasing tone was absent, replaced by a quiet, mature seriousness that he had only seen once before, at the shrine. The other day, during the curse, I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. For what you had to see. You have nothing to be sorry for, Akeno, he said firmly. We've been over this. I know, she said, looking out at the gardens. But it made me realize something. You told me that I get to choose which part of me is in control. And you were right. For a long time, I've been trying to either suppress the part of me that's my father, ours daughter, or overcompensate for it with my sadistic little games. She looked at him, and her violet eyes were startlingly clear. But when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to choose. I don't feel like I'm a fallen angel's daughter, or a devil's queen, or a sadist. I just feel like, Akeno. She reached out and placed her free hand on his arm. You carry a literal monster inside you, one that the whole world feared. I carry a legacy that made me hate myself. We're both scarred, broken, in our own ways. Her smile returned, but it was different. It was soft, intimate, and utterly genuine. But I think our broken pieces fit together perfectly. You don't try to fix me, and you don't recoil from my darkness. You just stand with me in it. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I don't know what's coming. This fight with Erebus, we might not survive it. But I know that I want to face it with you. Not just as a comrade. As a partner. It wasn't a girlish confession of love. It was a mature, considered proposal from one warrior to another, from one broken soul to its counterpart. It was an acknowledgement of a bond that had already been forged in the crucible of shared pain and mutual acceptance. Naruto looked into her eyes and saw his own struggles reflected there. He saw her strength, her resilience, her beautiful, damaged heart. He covered her hand with his own. You're right, he said. His voice husky. We do fit. He leaned in and gently kissed her forehead, a gesture of profound respect and deep affection. Partners. An hour later, Naruto was walking through the grand, silent halls of the Grimoire Castle when Rias found him. She was no longer in her Kuo uniform, but in a simple, elegant crimson dress. Her hair was down, and without the trappings of her peerage or her school life, she looked less like a king and more like a young woman carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Naruto, she said, her voice soft. May I have a word? He followed her into a vast, empty ballroom. Moonlight streamed through the high, arched windows, illuminating a floor of polished marble so perfect it looked like a frozen lake. They stopped in the center of the vast, silent room. When my brother first brought you here, she began, her voice barely more than a whisper in the cavernous space, I hated it. I hated him for going behind my back. I hated the situation that made it necessary. And I hated you for being the symbol of my lack of choice. She looked up at him, her blue-green eyes, so like her brother's, shining with an intense, vulnerable light. I saw you as a tool. A powerful weapon I could use to escape my engagement to Riser. I was drawn to your strength, to the way you commanded respect, to your power. It was selfish. She took a deep breath. As if steeling herself. But I was wrong. It wasn't your power I came to admire. It was you. It was the way you defended my honor before you even knew my name. It was the way you gave my peerage, my family, a path to victory when they thought they had none. It was the way you looked at Akeno's pain, Koneko's trauma, and Asia's fear and saw not weakness, but strength. She took a step closer. Her hands clenched at her sides. You showed me what true strength is. It's not about demonic power or a noble bloodline. It's about conviction. It's about having the will to protect others, not for honor or glory, but just because it's the right thing to do. You have a freedom in your soul that I've envied my entire life. She was standing before him now, looking up into his eyes. All the pride and pretense of the Grimoire air stripped away. It was just Rias. The original proposal was a contract to save my future, she said, her voice shaking slightly with the force of her emotions. But that contract is meaningless now. The 1 year is almost up, and the world might not even last that long. She reached out and took both of his hands in hers. So I'm asking you, not as the Grimoire heir, but as Rias. I am asking you, Naruto Uzumaki, not to fulfill a contract, but, to be my husband. To be my family. Not because you have to, not because it will save our race, but because I love you. The 3 words she had never said to anyone hung between them, shimmering with the weight of her entire soul. Naruto looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. He saw her courage, her pride, her fierce love for her family, and the incredible vulnerability she was showing him now. He thought of his own life, a long, lonely road that had finally, impossibly, led him here. He had arrived in this world adrift, a hero without a war, a savior without a purpose. And in this strange world of devils and dragons, in this quiet ballroom, he had found it. He smiled, a slow, warm smile that seemed to light up the entire room. It was the smile of a man who had finally, truly come home. Rias, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. My whole life, I've been chasing a dream. To be acknowledged. To have a place where I belong. To have a family. He squeezed her hands. I think I've finally found it. He looked into her eyes, and gave her his answer, an oath sworn not to a king, but to the woman he loved. Yes. He drew her in, and their lips met in the center of the moonlit ballroom. The contract, forged in politics and desperation, was dead. In its place was something new. An oath of the heart, freely given, a bond of love that would be their last, best defense against the coming silence. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Unmaking begins. The grand ballroom of the Grimoire estate was silent now, the moonlight a solitary witness to the oath that had been sworn. The fear that had haunted the world since the summit hadn't vanished, but it had been pushed back. Held at bay by a force more fundamental than any primordial void, a promise between 2 people. When Naruto and Rias rejoined the others, the change in them was palpable. A new, quiet strength radiated from them. An unspoken certainty that settled the frayed nerves of their family. For the first time in days, the oppressive cloud of dread lifted, replaced by a fragile, defiant dawn. They spent the next day in a state of strange, peaceful suspension. They didn't train. They didn't strategize. They simply existed, together. Akeno brewed tea, her smile finally reaching her eyes again. Issei and Kiba got into a spirited, if clumsy, game of shogi, their earlier animosity a forgotten dream. Asia tended to the gardens, her gentle humming a quiet song of hope. Koneko sat on the veranda. Curled up against Naruto's side, fast asleep in the warm afternoon sun. Rias sat with them, her hand resting near his, a silent, constant connection. They were savoring the quiet, the simple act of being, as if they all knew. On some instinctual level, that it would be their last moments of peace for a very long time. The end of that peace arrived not with a bang, but with a flicker. Graphia was the first to notice. She was observing a live news feed from the human world on a magical projection when her perfect composure shattered, replaced by a flicker of disbelief. Lord Searsex, she said, her voice sharp. You need to see this. The image on the projection showed a live feed from Tokyo. A news helicopter was filming the city, but the reporter was stammering, her voice filled with panic. The iconic Tokyo skytree, a marvel of modern engineering, was flickering. One moment it was there, a solid tower of steel and light, the next it was semi-transparent, a ghostly afterimage against the skyline. Before snapping back into solidity. The phenomenon was spreading. Buildings, cars, entire city blocks were phasing in and out of existence like a faulty projection. It wasn't being destroyed. It was being unwritten. Before they could process the horror, another alert flared. This one was from the underworld. A map appeared, showing a massive, gaping hole where the territory of the House of Agaras used to be. It wasn't a crater from an explosion. It was a perfect, spherical absence. The land, the castles, the very devils who lived there were simply gone. Erased. The calls began to flood in. A communication line, hastily opened between the 3 factions, became a chorus of chaos. From heaven, reports of angelic choirs suddenly singing in reverse, their holy songs turning into discordant blasphemies. From Grigori, Azazel's frantic voice reported that their most advanced research facilities were suffering catastrophic data corruption, centuries of knowledge on acred gears and magical theory dissolving into meaningless code. It's the unmaking, Naruto said, his voice grim as he stood with Rias and the others, watching the horrifying reports pile up. It's started. Sears X appeared in a crimson transport circle, his face pale and drawn. It's a coordinated ritual. Azazel's sensors are picking up massive, synchronized bursts of conceptual energy from dozens of locations around the globe. They're not targeting us with armies. They're destabilizing the laws of reality itself. A new projection flared to life, a global map crisscrossed with glowing lines of energy. It looked like a spiderweb woven over the planet. Dozens of points were glowing with a malevolent, black light. Ancient artifacts, Sears X explained, his voice tight with urgency. Relics from dead gods. Pantheons that were wiped out in the ancient wars. Erebus's agents have unearthed them. They're using them as anchors, turning them into a network that is, I don't know, poisoning the world's operating system. The lines of black energy on the map were all flowing, converging like rivers into a single, massive vortex of power. The location of that vortex made every heart in the room freeze. Kuo Town. Rias whispered, her voice filled with dawning horror. It's the strongest magical confluence in the region, Sears X said, his fists clenched. And it's your territory. It's where you all live. And it's where he is. He looked at Naruto. You're the anomaly, the spark of life that resists the void. They aren't just attacking a strategic location. They're trying to perform a planetary exorcism. And you are the demon they want to cast out. Issei slammed his fist into the wall. Then let's go. What are we waiting for? You don't understand, Sears X said, his voice grim. The factions are in chaos. I have to deal with the political fallout of the disappearing territories. Michael's forces are trying to contain temporal paradoxes that are erupting in heaven. Azel is fighting to stop the complete collapse of the global communications network. We're all pinned down, fighting a war on 100 fronts. We can't send reinforcements. The unspoken words hung in the air. You're on your own. The sky above the Grimoire estate began to change. The familiar purple hue of the underworld sky started to rot, streaks of a sickly, gray nothingness appearing like wounds. The unmaking had reached them. We have to go back, Naruto said, his voice a calm, steady anchor in the rising sea of panic. Now. Naruto, it's a trap, Rias argued, grabbing his arm. They want you there. Of course they do. He replied, turning to face her. He placed his hands on her shoulders, his blue eyes boring into hers. And we want them there, all in one place, focused on their little ritual. We can't save the world from here. But we can cut the head off the snake. He looked around at the faces of his family, at Akeno's fierce determination, Koneko's stoic resolve, Issei's desperate courage. Asia's terrified but unwavering faith. We do this together. There were no more arguments. With a final, grim nod from Sears X, Rias summoned a transport circle. They stepped into the crimson light, leaving the relative safety of the Grimoire castle for the heart of the storm. They arrived in the courtyard of Kuo Academy, and the world they returned to was a nightmare. The sky above the town was no longer sky. It was a swirling vortex of black and gray, a gaping wound in the heavens from which a silent, psychic scream of absolute despair rained down. The very air was thick and cold, tasting of ash and ozone. The laws of physics were fraying at the edges, trees shed their leaves in reverse, the water in the fountain flowed upwards, and the school building itself seemed grown and stretch as if it were made of taffy. And they were not alone. Standing in the center of the courtyard, where the ley lines converged with the greatest intensity, was a man in the simple, dark robes of a high priest. It was Lord Zapar, the ancient devil who had masqueraded as a guidance counselor, now revealed in his true, terrible glory. His face was a mask of ecstatic zeal, and he stood before a pulsating obsidian altar that seemed to drink the very light from the air, the central anchor of the ritual. Around him, a dozen lesser silencers, hooded figures of pure shadow, chanted in a language that hurt to hear. The anomaly arrives. Zapar's voice boomed, not through the air, but directly inside their minds. You have come to witness the glorious dawn of the great silence. To be the first morsel in a feast of oblivion. The only thing dawning here is a world-class beatdown. Issei yelled, summoning his boosted gear, the familiar red glow a defiant splash of color in the gray world. Courtesy of the Occult Research Club. Brave words from noisy children, Zapar said with a pitying smile. He raised a hand. Let us begin the lesson in silence. The silencers surged forward, their shadowy forms gliding over the warped ground. The final battle had begun. Positions. Rias commanded, her voice ringing with the authority of a king. This is our home. We will not let it fall. They moved like a well-oiled machine, the culmination of every battle, every training session, every shared moment. Kiba and Zenobia became a whirlwind of steel at the forefront, Durandal's holy light a searing fire against the shadows, Kiba's demonic blades a blur of precise strikes. They were no longer rivals, they were two sides of the same perfect sword, a living barrier against the tide of darkness. Boost! 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 Issei roared, but he wasn't charging blindly. He held his ground, a crimson aura flaring around him. Welsh Dragon Balance Breaker. Red, draconic armor enveloped him. He had finally achieved it. Not through lust, but through the desperate will to protect his friends. He didn't use the power to attack. He pointed his gauntlet at Kiba and Zenobia. Transfer. A torrent of pure draconic energy flowed into the two knights, their speed and power multiplying tenfold. From the sky, Akeno descended like a wrathful goddess, arcs of holy lightning leaping from her fingertips. The pure, chaotic energy was anathema to the silencers, ordered nothingness, making them shriek and recoil. Below, Koneko was a white-haired comet of raw power. She moved with the brutal efficiency Naruto had taught her. Every blow infused with senjutsu, shattering the silencers, physical forms with the force of a meteor. In the backline, Asia stood, her hands clasped in prayer. A warm, green light radiated from her. A stark contrast to the despair-filled atmosphere. It was twilight healing, but more powerful than ever before. It mended wounds the instant they were inflicted, but it did more than that. Her aura of pure, unshakable faith was a conceptual weapon, weakening the despair on which the silencers fed, making them slower, more vulnerable. Rias was the commander, a crimson meteor of destructive power. She flew across the battlefield, her demonic energy flaring, unleashing concentrated blasts of the power of destruction to obliterate clusters of enemies, creating openings for the others. Her eyes constantly tracking the flow of the entire battle. It was a symphony of perfectly coordinated violence. They were holding the line. They were winning. But Naruto's eyes were only on one target. Zapar. He entered six-path sage mode, the golden cloak erupting around him, a sun in the heart of the dying world. He shot towards the high priest like a golden arrow. Zapar didn't even flinch. He simply smiled. You rely on the laws of this world, sage. But what happens when those laws no longer apply? He waved a hand. The ground beneath Naruto turned to a thick, viscous liquid. His charge turned into a stumble as he was caught in the mire. Zapar waved his other hand, and the air itself sharpened, turning into a storm of invisible razor blades that shredded at Naruto's golden cloak. This is the power of unmaking. Zapar declared. The power to edit reality. You cannot fight me. You can only be erased. Naruto roared, forcing his way through the corrupted ground. He created a Rasengan. But as he thrust it forward, Zapar simply pointed at it, and the swirling sphere of chakra unraveled, its rotation ceasing, its form dissolving into nothing. This was a battle of concepts. Naruto's power was based on the flow and manipulation of natural energy. Zapar's was the power to command that energy to simply stop. He's not overpowering my jutsu, Naruto realized. His mind racing as he dodged a wave of solid shadow. He's convincing it that it doesn't exist. He couldn't win with ninjutsu. He had to rely on the one thing Zapar couldn't unmake, his own body. He burst from the mire and engaged Zapar in a taijutsu battle of blinding speed. Fists and feet flew, each blow imbued with the raw, physical power of sage mode. He was landing hits, but Zapar seemed to feel no pain. His body reforming from any damage with a flicker of shadow. He was drawing endless power from the obsidian altar, the anchor. It's no use, Naruto. Rias yelled, blasting a silencer that got too close. He's tethered to the artifact. As long as it's active, he's invincible. They had to destroy the anchor. But it was protected by Zapar, who was unbeatable. It was a perfect, deadly checkmate. Naruto was thrown back by a blast of pure conceptual decay, his golden cloak flickering violently. He looked at his family, fighting so desperately, so bravely. He saw Rias, her face streaked with sweat and grime. Her eyes burning with defiance. He saw Akeno, Koneko, Asia, all of them. His family. The oaths he had sworn, the love he had accepted. It all converged into a single, blazing point of clarity. There was one way. A desperate, insane, all-or-nothing gambit. Issei. Naruto yelled, his voice echoing with power. Everything you've got. Give it to me. Now. Issei didn't hesitate. He turned, aiming his gauntlet at Naruto. Boost. 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 Transfer. The roar of the Welsh dragon was deafening as the entirety of his accumulated power, the raw force of a celestial dragon, surged across the battlefield and poured into Naruto. The golden cloak around Naruto exploded, growing so bright it burned back the shadows, so powerful it momentarily stabilized the warping reality around them. Rias. Naruto roared, holding up his hand. A Rasenshuriken began to form, larger and more violent than any he had ever created. It was a miniature, shrieking star of pure, natural energy. Your power. Add it to mine. Rias understood. This was it. She poured every last ounce of her own demonic energy, the pure, conceptual power of destruction, into Naruto's attack. The star of natural energy turned a brilliant, swirling crimson and gold. It was a paradox given form, the ultimate technique of creation and life, infused with the ultimate power of annihilation and destruction. It was their bond, their love. Their shared will made manifest. Everyone. Naruto bellowed. Clear a path. They heard him. They saw the terrifying, beautiful sphere of power in his hand. With a final, unified battle cry, they unleashed everything they had left, blasting a momentary, desperate hole in the silencers, ranks, a clear line of sight between Naruto and the altar. Zappar's eyes widened in genuine shock. A flicker of something like fear appearing on his face for the first time. What is that? It defies all logic. Creation and destruction cannot coexist. You wanted to erase the board because you don't like the rules. Naruto yelled, his voice a thunderclap that shook the heavens. Well, we're making a new one. He threw it. The 6 paths, Grimoire Rasenshuriken flew. It did not shriek or roar. It moved in an eerie silence, for it was unmaking the very air it passed through. Zappar tried to erect a shield of nothingness, but the paradoxical attack could not be defined, could not be unmade. It struck the obsidian altar. For a single, silent moment, there was nothing. No sound. No light. And then, Kuo town was bathed in a wave of pure, white, brilliant light. It was not an explosion of force, but of concept. The despair was annihilated by hope. The silence was shattered by a song of life. The unmaking was unmade. The altar, and Lord Zappar with it, were not just destroyed. They were erased from the equation, their void-like existence utterly cancelled out by the paradoxical fusion of creation and destruction. The black hole in the sky sealed itself, and the normal, mundane blue sky of the human world broke through the clouds. The warping ground solidified. The air was clean again. It was over. Battered, bleeding, and utterly exhausted, the occult research club stood together in the ruins of their school's courtyard. They had done it. They had stood against the void, and they had won. They collapsed in a heap, laughing and crying, a tangle of limbs and relief. Naruto, his power completely spent, lay on his back, looking up at the sky. Rias, Akeno, Koneko, and Asia were gathered around him, their faces filled with an exhausted, tearful adoration. He had found it. Everything he had ever searched for. Not a title, not a throne, but this. This feeling. This family. A crimson communication circle shimmered in the air. Searzek's voice, filled with an awe and relief so profound it made him sound like a different person, echoed around them. Naruto, Rias, you did it. The unmaking has stopped. All across the world, reality is stabilizing. You saved us all. There was a pause. And then his voice returned, graver now. But this was just a ritual. Erebus himself has not yet been faced. This war, it's only just begun. The words hung in the air, a promise of future hardship. Of a greater darkness yet to come. But as Naruto looked at the faces of the 4 women who had sworn their hearts to him, as he felt Rias take his hand, he felt no fear. He felt no despair. He simply felt the fierce, burning, unshakable purpose of a man who had everything in the universe to protect. He squeezed her hand back, a tired, confident smile on his face. Let him come, he whispered. We'll be ready. Chapter 10 End.